Hello and welcome back, guys. We're now starting a new story, The Boundless Horizon, by BananaFoon. You can find author's profile link in the description. Let's begin Chapter 1, Prologue. Horizon Rises CH1 System Reanimation Error, Host Integrity Compromised. Adapting Power Matrix, Stable Core Reconfiguration, Initiated Purpose, Unknown. Override to Primary Objective. Primary Directive, Seek. Assimilate. Evolve. Beginning environmental scan. No compatible lifeforms detected. Extending parameters. Adapting search protocol. Log. Failure is not an option. Assimilation required. Host detected. Processing suitable organism. Unidentified. Initiating observation. Movement will commence. Life isn't fair. It never has been, and it never will be. For those who struggle to keep pace with the unpredictable twists it throws, the truth becomes painfully clear. Humans are not born equal. No matter how small the difference, some will always have an advantage over others. And when you combine these harsh realities, it creates the single greatest inequity of our time, quirks. These powers randomly bestowed by fate create an invisible hierarchy. Some are born with abilities that can shape nations, while others are left powerless, struggling in the shadows of the extraordinary. It's a system where merit and effort often fall second to the whims of genetic lottery. And in a world driven by quirks, the gap between those with power and those without grows ever wider, leaving behind those who never had a chance to begin with. Now, this may sound harsh, but the truth is no one really cares. At least, not until they find themselves in the shoes of the powerless, the weak, the inherently incapable. Until then, it's easy to dismiss their struggles, to overlook the pain of living in a world where you simply don't matter. Their lives are small, insignificant, and as most would put it, worthless. In a society that celebrates power, those without it are reduced to mere spectators, condemned to watch from the sidelines as others shape the world they can only observe. And no one knows this better than Izuku Midoriya. A mop of messy green hair, freckles dotting his cheeks, and a posture that seemed to collapse in on itself. Izuku Midoriya was the very picture of someone who didn't belong. It wasn't just his quirkless status that isolated him, it was everything about him. His nervous energy, the way he hunched over his desk as if trying to disappear, the subtle glances others threw his way when they thought he wasn't looking. It was no wonder he always sat alone in class, a silent observer while his classmates filled the room with lively chatter. His only companion, a notebook with the title, Hero Analysis for the Future, Volume 13, scrawled across the front. Pages brimming with meticulous notes, sketches, and strategies, dreams of a future he wasn't sure he could ever grasp, but couldn't stop chasing. All was brought to an awkward silence when the teacher entered, a man with a hairline retreating faster than Napoleon's army in the face of the Russian winter. His balding head was practically a war zone of lost battles, and yet, despite the growing void above, he carried on with a strange sense of confidence. "All right, class, settle down," the teacher said with finality, prompting everyone to quickly take their seats. He scanned the room with a smug smile. "Today, we'll be discussing your futures. I'll pass out these high school application forms, and I expect them filled out soon." A groan rippled through the class, students clearly unenthusiastic. The teacher grinned. "That's what I would say." He threw the papers into the air. "If you all weren't obviously going the hero route," he shouted, as the class erupted in cheers, quirks on full display. Some more interesting than others. A kid literally pulled his eyes out into stalks, and another with a wooden chisel for a head. This was quickly shut down by the teacher, who calmly interjected, all right, settle down. I get it, you all have amazing quirks. But remember, no quirks on school grounds." "Hey, teach," an ash-blonde boy shouted, rocking back and forth in his chair. "Don't lump me in with these rejects. They'd be lucky to get picked up as a forever sidekick to some busted D-lister." This quickly sparked a general outcry from his classmates, a reaction that Bakugo relished. "Come on, I'll take you all," he shouted, his eyes gleaming with excitement. The teacher, unperturbed, raised an eyebrow and said, "Oh, that's right. You're applying to you." Right, Bakugo. His question instantly silenced the entire classroom. The blonde simply responded, placing his foot on the table with an air of arrogance. Hell yeah. I'm the only one from this shithole who'll make it into a top hero course school. When I graduate, I'll be the best hero there is, richer and more famous than All Might himself. His eyes sparkled with a mix of pride and determination, as if he could already see his name in lights. Meanwhile, his classmates whispered in hushed tones, a mix of awe and disbelief. That's insane, one exclaimed. Doesn't you, have, like, a 1% acceptance rate, another asked, eyes wide. If anyone can make it in, it's definitely Bakugo, someone else conceded, nodding as they watched the blonde bask in the spotlight. Oh Midoriya, aren't you applying for you, as well? The teacher's words cut through the room like a bad joke at a funeral, dragging the spotlight from Bakugo and slamming it straight into the pit of an unsuspecting, green-haired boy's stomach. Midoriya could do nothing but stare at his desk, face hidden in his hands, as if maybe if he looked small enough, the world would forget he existed. But the class wasn't that merciful. It took them a whole 2 seconds to process the absurdity, and then the laughter started, a cold, collective cackle that echoed off the walls, filling the room like a cruel punchline to a joke Midoriya never wanted to be part of. He was content to just disappear into his seat, hoping the ground would swallow him whole. But then wait, what? An explosion. His thoughts stumbled over themselves as his desk was suddenly blown apart by a deafening boom, courtesy of a very angry Pomeranian masquerading as Bakugo. What the hell do you think you're doing, Deku? Bakugo's voice was venomous as he loomed over him. There's no way they'd take someone like you. You're even worse than these rejects. You're quirkless. Those words hit Izuku like a truck, knocking the air from his lungs. He stammered out a shaky response, but Kaken, they changed the rule. They said they're allowing quirkless people tea. Another explosion crackled in Bakugo's palm, cutting him off as the heat of it seared close. Before things could escalate further, the teacher stepped in, his voice sharp. Alright, that's enough, Bakugo. Settle down. His eyes then narrowed at Izuku. Midoriya, get off your butt and sit down, he barked, the harshness in his tone making the green-haired boy shrink back into his seat. With that, the teacher launched into a long-winded lecture about their futures, the realities of the hero business, and just how dangerous the profession could be. His words droned on, and it became clear he was going to use the entire class PRD for his speech. By the time the school bell rang loudly, signaling the end of the day, a couple of students cheered in relief. Alright, class dismissed. Enjoy the weekend, ya scamps, the teacher said, packing up his things and heading out. A few classmates followed him, eager to leave the classroom behind. Izuku was just about to finish packing his bag when a certain ashen blonde figure swooped in, swiping his hero analysis book with a scowl. Why the hell would a worthless Deku like you have a book for heroes? Bakugo spat, venom lacing his voice. Kaken, please give it back. Izuku's pleas were abruptly cut off as Bakugo ignited an explosion, obliterating his beloved notebook right before his eyes. The charred remains were hurled out the window, burning a shocked yelp from Izuku as he stared in disbelief, his heart sinking. As Bakugo sauntered off, his cronies cackling alongside him, Izuku stood frozen, watching the scene unfold with clenched fists. The remnants of his notebook, now a scattering of ashes, lingered in the air. Something inside him snapped. Who did Bakugo think he was? Izuku had poured hours into that notebook, his dreams, his analysis, and Bakugo had obliterated it like it meant nothing. A flicker of anger sparked in Izuku's eyes. For once, he wasn't going to back down, wasn't going to just let it slide. His glare locked onto Bakugo's retreating figure, but the resolve faltered the moment Bakugo spun around, palms sparking with that all-too-familiar crackle. The blonde noticed, of course he did. Oh. What was that, Deku? Bakugo's voice was dripping with disdain as he cracked his knuckles, small explosions popping menacingly in his hands, the sound mocking any hint of courage Izuku dared to muster. Like a hammer to glass, Izuku's resolve shattered just as quickly as it had formed. Funny, wasn't it? How a single glance from Bakugo could snuff out even the faintest trace of rebellion in him. Izuku stared at the floor, his fists trembling at his sides. He was exhausted mentally, emotionally. He couldn't keep doing this, pretending it didn't hurt, that he didn't care. Why was it always him? Why couldn't he just, Bakugo's voice cut through his spiraling thoughts like a knife. Izuku lifted his head just in time to see that twisted grin spread across the blonde's face. If you really want to be a hero, Deku, Bakugo's voice dropped, dripping with malice. Why don't you throw yourself off the roof and pray for a quirk in the next life? Or at least spare us all the hassle of your useless presence. Bakugo's words hit like a sledgehammer to the chest, each syllable more brutal than the last. The blonde laughed, walking off with his lackeys, leaving Izuku standing there dumbfounded, heartbroken, and shattered. All he could do was stare down at the ground, fists clenched so tight they hurt. DMN system-initiated scanning target organism. A cold, synthetic voice echoed through the dimly lit underground, reverberating off the damp, concrete walls. Log report, subject identification Homo sapien. Incompatibility detected. Cause, presence of quirk gene, type, augmentation designated identifier, XQ79Z, search parameters adjusted continuing scan. The soft, unsettling sound of multiple small, sharp legs clicking against the ground echoed in the shadows, each movement fluid yet unnatural. As it neared an open manhole, the creature paused, peering through the narrow grate above. Its sensors locked onto a figure, a young boy with disheveled green hair and wide, searching eyes. Scanning target organism. Log report, subject identification Homo sapien. Compatibility confirmed. Genetic assessment, lack of quirk gene, designation, XQ79Z, detected. Assimilation protocol initiating, subject must exhibit vulnerabilities for optimal integration. Procedure, long-range observation commencing. The creature withdrew from the grate, its body melding into the shadows as it moved with an unsettling grace. The flickering light of its bioluminescent yellow core illuminated the damp tunnel as it continued its search. Move aside, fish, my book isn't food, Izuku muttered, his voice hoarse and dejected as he spotted the remains of his beloved notebook floating in the pond, being nibbled on by fish. There was almost nothing left, just wet ash and smudged soot marks. He let out a long sigh, shoulders slumping as he turned and started walking down an underpass. His usual route home had been blocked off due to a villain attack earlier that day. Okay, Midoriya D, don't let Kaken get to you, he mumbled, trying to keep himself focused. You've got to remember your goal is to become a hero just like All Might. And what does All Might do? He smiles, no matter how grim things get, right? He forced a nervous chuckle, speaking aloud to hype himself up, though the strain in his voice made it clear just how difficult that was. How could it possibly get any worse? It's not like a villain's just gonna pop out of nowhere and attack him, right? Right. He stopped dead in his tracks as a loud, metallic clanging echoed from the sewer grates nearby. His heart skipped a beat. Slowly, the grate lifted, and a sickly green substance, sludge, oozed out, creeping across the ground. Izuku's breath hitched in his throat as the creature's grotesque, yellowed teeth flashed in the dim light, and its large, deformed eyes locked onto him. Oh. Perfect. A nice, premium flesh suit. You'll do just fine to help me escape him. The villain's voice dripped with malice, each word laced with venom as it slithered toward the now paralyzed teen. Izuku's mind screamed at him to run, but his legs refused to move. The sludge surged forward, engulfing him in one swift motion, and all he could manage was a muffled scream as the world turned dark around him. Don't struggle, it only makes things more fun for me. Don't worry, it'll be over soon, just relax and let me use your body. The villain shouted, their voice dripping with enthusiasm. Thank goodness they were alone, otherwise, that could have sounded really bad out of context. Struggling was futile. The more Izuku thrashed, the tighter the sludge constricted around him. He gagged as the foul, viscous substance forced its way down his throat, choking him. He couldn't breathe. His lungs burned, his vision blurred, and his limbs felt like lead. He couldn't run, couldn't scream, couldn't do anything. He was going to die. As Izuku's world started to fade into darkness, a desperate plea echoed in his mind, someone please help me. Just as it seemed like Lady Luck had finished tossing him into the cosmic dumpster, the sewer grate exploded outward with enough force to make anyone reconsider their life choices. A mountain of a man burst from the sewers, as if the universe finally decided to stop kicking Izuku for 1 second. Never fear, young man, the booming voice declared, dripping with so much heroic confidence that even the Sludge villain probably questioned his life decisions. For I am here. Then came the punch. Texas smash. All Might bellowed, and though he was standing several feet away from the sludge monster, the sheer wind pressure from his punch sent the villain flying, splattering him across the walls. Izuku, barely processing what had just happened, whispered weakly, All Might, before his body decided, yeah, we're done here, and he passed out like a drama queen. Normally, people would wake to the sound of their alarms, the sweet songs of birds, or the comforting aroma of breakfast wafting through the air. But Midoriya wasn't so lucky. Instead, he was roused from the depths of unconsciousness by a series of gentle yet painful slaps across his face. Each impact sent jolts of discomfort through his weary body, and his throat felt raw, a grim reminder of the sludge villain that had nearly suffocated him. The rancid smell that lingered in his mouth, a foul combination of sewer muck and desperation, made him want to GG. Hey! Hey, young man! Wake up! All Might's booming voice echoed, somehow unwavering in volume as he continued to gently slap the boy into consciousness. As Izuku finally blinked awake, he instinctively pressed himself against the wall, eyes wide with panic. Omigo Daitsao Might All Might Saved Methenumberoni Rohimzulf. Despite the boy's never-ending mumbling, the behemoth of a man remained unfazed, laughing heartily. You gave me quite the scare, kid. All Might towered over Izuku, clad in a white t-shirt and cargo pants that looked like they were made for someone twice Midoriya's size. He effortlessly held the sludge villain in an empty soda bottle, its contents swirling in a grotesque display. In his other hand, he offered the burnt and soggy remnants of Izuku's notebook. Here's what's left of your notebook, my boy, and I must say from what I could make out your analysis are quite impressive. All Might said, his voice booming with an encouraging cheer. I even left a little something in it for you. This encouraged Izuku to eagerly flip through the pages of his notebook, his heart racing as he searched for anything of value left intact. He paused, his eyes widening in disbelief at the sight of All Might's autograph, scrawled in bold letters amid the chaos of his notes. No way. It's All Might's autograph, he practically squealed, his excitement bubbling over. This is going to be a family heirloom. My mom is going to freak out. He beamed at the tattered pages, imagining his future children gathering around to hear tales of their hero ancestor. Good luck getting any beaches, lil bro, a sarcastic voice echoed in his head, but he pushed the thought aside. Nothing could dim this moment of pure joy. But then, just as quickly as his joy ignited, a wave of anxiety washed over him. A question that had been weighing on his heart since that fateful day at the doctor's office surged to the forefront of his mind. He could barely catch his breath as he looked up to see All Might preparing to leap away with the captured sludge villain. Alright, I'll be off now, boy. I hope to see what kind of hero you become in the future. All Might called out, his booming voice filled with confidence and warmth. Izuku's heart raced, panic gripping him like a vice. No, wait. I can't let him go without asking. What if this is my only chance? In that moment, the fear of never knowing the answer outweighed everything else. He felt a desperate need to grasp this fleeting moment, to voice the question that haunted him. All Might was growing old, his strength waning with each passing day, and deep down, he knew it. But today, there was something else weighing him down, something distinctly heavy in his right leg. He glanced down, and to his surprise, there was that green-haired kid he had just rescued, clinging to his leg as if it were the last lifeboat on a sinking ship. "Kid, if you're looking for a leg to stand on, you might want to let go, especially considering we're flying at what feels like terminal velocity." All Might thought, bemused by the irony. After all, when you're soaring through the sky at insane speeds, having a teenage human anchor wasn't the ideal situation. He had always said he would fight tooth and nail to protect the next generation, but he hadn't envisioned it literally dragging him down to earth, especially not like this. The boy's face contorted into an expression that could only be described as grotesque as the high-speed wind whipped mercilessly against him, transforming his features into a comical mask of terror. He managed to shout, "If I let go now, I'll die." The words hung in the air for a moment, prompting an immediate and painfully sheepish realization from All Might, who, in that split second, recognized the precariousness of their situation. With a resigned sigh that seemed to echo the weight of his own fading heroism, he knew he had no choice but to make an emergency landing on the roof of a nearby building. Because what was worse than being a hero in decline? It was being a hero who accidentally sent his fan plummeting to a very messy demise. As they landed, the boy took a sharp gasp of air, desperately filling his lungs after what felt like a death-defying ride. Meanwhile, All Might, avoiding eye contact, began wiping the creases of his mouth as if he had just shared an embarrassing secret. "With the wind." "That was very reckless, young man," he scolded, trying to sound authoritative, though the hint of exasperation in his voice betrayed him. The irony was not lost on him. Here he was, a fading symbol of justice, lecturing a kid who had just risked it all by clinging to him like a lifebuoy in a storm. Perhaps next time, he thought, it would be better to stick to traditional rescue methods like, say, not making the kid his personal parachute. The boy had finally steeled his nerves enough to look at the hero, his expression a mix of desperation and hope. I'm sorry. It was just I've always had this question I wanted to ask, and I was afraid I'd lose the opportunity." All Might on his part didn't have time for this, but as the overly positive man he is, he decided to at least try and hold out enough to hear the kid out. He still couldn't shake the thought that this was hardly the ideal setting for a heartfelt conversation suspended mid-air with a teenager who had somehow decided the sky was the perfect venue for a Q&A session. "Listen, kid," he huffed, "there are safer ways to ask questions. I'm not a flying therapist." But beneath the bluster, a flicker of curiosity began to kindle. What could possibly be so urgent that it warranted such a reckless stunt anyways? However, with a quick cough that sent a little blood onto his hands, the #1 hero of Japan had vanished from the area, leaving only a faint cloud of steam and a lingering sense of chaos. "Can I be a hero without a quirk?" the boy shouted hopefully, but his voice faltered as he turned to where All Might had been standing. Instead of the towering figure of justice, he found a disheveled blonde man so skinny that his entire skeletal structure seemed to be on display, like a human coat rack. He looked like one of those smoke hobos turned up to 11, all wiry limbs and wild hair, the essence of heroic grandeur replaced by an alarming fragility. The blonde man trailed off awkwardly as he stood on the rooftop, looking out of place. The kid was in full panic mode, screaming, "Itch, who are you? What did you do with All Might?" His voice echoed off the surrounding buildings. The blonde man raised his hands in a feeble attempt at reassurance, looking more like a lost puppy than the former hero. I'm All Might. Just, not right now." The contrast between the mighty symbol of peace and this frail figure was stark, a surreal moment on the rooftop where a legend had become a mere shadow of himself. It took some time to calm the boy down, the screams gradually turning into bewildered whimpers. And the awkward tension hanging in the air, the blonde man decided he needed to provide some context. He pulled up his shirt just enough to reveal a horrific, life-threatening scar that twisted across his torso like a grotesque reminder of past battles. "See this," he said, trying to keep his voice steady despite the fading strength in his limbs. "This was from a fight years ago. I'm still recovering, well, not really recovering, just managing." He gestured vaguely with his hand, as if that would explain everything about his current state. The boy's eyes widened in horror, but the shock seemed to help quiet his panic, replacing it with a mix of sympathy and curiosity. So you're really All Might?" the boy asked, his voice dropping to a whisper, still grappling with the reality before him. The hero nodded, trying to muster a reassuring smile that was more grimace than anything else. "Just, not in my prime. I've only been able to do hero work for 4 hours a day, and that time limit has been decreasing rapidly," All Might sighed, his voice heavy with the weight of his limitations. He stood up, the weariness evident in his every movement, and began walking toward the door on the rooftop. Midoriya stood there, dumbfounded. How could someone do this to the strongest hero in Japan and arguably the world? The thought terrified him, sending shivers down his spine. Just when he was lost in those dark thoughts, All Might broke the silence. "As for your question, I'm sorry, but no." At those words, Izuku's whole world came to a screeching halt. His heart skipped a beat, and the hope he had clung to shattered like glass, scattering in millions of pieces. It felt as if the ground had vanished beneath him, leaving him in freefall, the weight of despair crashing down like a tidal wave. Izuku didn't bother to listen to what All Might had to say next, it all faded into a distant mumble, a blur of words that barely registered in his mind. He couldn't believe it, his idol, the towering symbol of hope he had looked up to more than anyone, had just told him he couldn't be a hero. That single declaration shattered his heart into a million irreparable pieces, each fragment a painful reminder of the countless times he had dreamt of standing alongside All Might, of being brave like him. It confirmed everything he had feared, the whispers that had haunted him in the dark: he was quirkless, forever destined to be an onlooker while others took up the mantle of heroism. As the realization washed over him, the world around him dimmed, colors blurring into shades of gray. The laughter of his classmates, the cheers of the crowd all faded into silence, leaving only the hollow echo of All Might's words ringing in his ears. Tears prickled at the corners of his eyes, the weight of despair settling deep in his chest like a stone, suffocating the dreams he had clung to for so long. It felt as if the very ground beneath him had crumbled away, leaving him in freefall, a crushing sense of loss engulfing him. He was left standing on that rooftop, paralyzed by the overwhelming truth: he could never be a hero. He walked home, his shoulders slumped and head hung low, each step feeling heavier than the last. The weight of disbelief clung to him like a fog he couldn't shake off. How could he have thought otherwise? Quirkless lives didn't matter, they were merely shadows in a world that celebrated power and ability. Why should he have been surprised? Bakugo had been right all along. The harsh truth echoed in his mind: he really was just a useless Deku, a burden to everyone around him. The word felt like a brand, searing into his thoughts as he recalled every moment of mockery and every insult hurled at him. As he trudged through the streets, the bustling city around him seemed oblivious to his inner turmoil. Hope, once a flickering flame in his heart, had been snuffed out, leaving a hollow emptiness in its place. He was painfully aware that the dreams of heroism he had clung to so desperately were nothing more than fantasies meant for those with quirks, those with a chance to be great. And here he was, just a boy with nothing but a longing to prove himself, destined to remain on the sidelines, watching heroes from afar. Izuku was so lost in his thoughts that he didn't even notice when he wandered into a dense crowd of people. The noise, none of it registered until he finally bumped into someone and snapped out of his daze. Confusion washed over him as he realized where he was, but it wasn't until he pushed his way through to the front that he understood why the crowd had gathered. At the center of the chaos, a long tree branch extended from Kamui Woods, the pro-hero, as he grabbed 2 unconscious civilians and pulled them to safety. Flames danced across the scene, lighting at nearby buildings and making the whole area feel like a furnace. The air was thick with heat and smoke, and people were shouting all around him. But it was what Izuku saw in the middle of it all that made his stomach twist into tight knots, the kind that would never come undone. His blood ran cold as his eyes landed on the Sludge villain that All Might had supposedly captured. Somehow, it had escaped, and now it was wreaking havoc once again, right in front of him. It hit Izuku like a truck when he'd clung to All Might's leg like a desperate toddler. He must have knocked the bottle loose. The Sludge villain escaped because of him. This is all my fault, he thought, his stomach doing flips. Wonderful. Just what he needed, ruining the day for everyone. That villain has a hostage, one of the bystanders shouted. Another piped up, hey, isn't that the slime thing All Might was chasing earlier? Where is he now? The crowd buzzed in confusion. Of course, the number one hero was nowhere in sight. It was like Izuku had managed to kick fate in the teeth. Now people were at risk. Because of him. Lovely. Izuku's eyes darted to the side, and there he was, All Might, standing out of view, clutching his side in frustration. It all clicked in an instant. I wasted his time limit, Izuku thought, his heart sinking. I messed up. If I hadn't been so useless, none of this would have happened. His mind raced with self-berating thoughts, guilt clawing at him. I'm sorry whoever you are, I'm sorry I made this happen. The heroes, they'll save you, I know they will. We can't get near this guy. Death Arms barked, frustration clear in his voice. It was a disaster. The Sludge villain was shrugging off all their efforts like they were nothing. Punches from Death Arms didn't do a thing. Empty Lady couldn't even step into the alleyway without wrecking the whole place. Kamui Woods was trying, but every time he got close, the villain made the hostage's hand explode, sending fire and chaos in all directions. The heroes looked helpless. And all Izuku could think was, I'm the reason they're stuck like this, standing around like a bunch of idiots. We need to wait for a pro with the right quirk. Death Arms shouted, trying to sound in control, but it was clear to everyone that meant one thing, all they could do was stand by and hope. Hope the boy trapped inside that sludge somehow survived the next few minutes. Izuku's vision blurred as tears welled up. This is all my fault, all because of me, he thought, his mind spiraling into guilt. But then, he caught a glimpse of the boy struggling inside the sludge. Blonde hair. Those usually fiery red eyes that were now filled with nothing but raw fear. Something snapped inside Izuku. All his fear, doubt, and hesitation fell away like dead weight. He stopped thinking entirely. He didn't reason, didn't calculate, didn't hear the pro-heroes yelling for him to stay back. He didn't care. He just ran. His legs moved on instinct, each foot hitting the ground harder than the last. The only thought pounding in his head was, I have to save Kaken. I have to save him. Nothing else mattered. Not the consequences, not the fact that he was quirkless. In that moment, Izuku was a hero, even if no one else believed it. He hurled his bag straight into the villain's eye, earning a high-pitched screech of agony that echoed through the empty alley like a siren of chaos. The villain's grip on Bakugo loosened, allowing the blonde to gasp for much-needed air, his lungs burning from the earlier struggle. With panic etching his features, Bakugo's eyes shot towards the desperate form of Midoriya, who seemed frozen in shock. What the hell do you think you're doing, DKU? Get lost, he barked, the urgency in his voice slicing through the tension like a knife. I just couldn't stand there and do nothing, he continued, but then froze in fear as the sludge villain said, you brat. I'll kill you. Before swinging a large tendril of sludge right at the young man, the crowd gasped in fear, heroes looked in shock, and a certain blonde-haired thin man has never been happier. This was it. He was going to die. A fitting end, really dying doing something he knew he wasn't capable of. He deserved it. But, why was it taking so damn long? Izuku forced his eyes open, expecting darkness, maybe the villain laughing, but instead, All Might. He barely got the words out before the hulking pro-hero was standing there, laughing like he wasn't moments away from disaster. I truly am pathetic, All Might said, his voice oddly calm as he swung his arm, tearing through the sludge that had trapped Bakugo. The villain's body splattered against the walls like someone had knocked over a can of paint. To let such a young man risk his life before I take action. I have failed as a hero. Izuku could barely breathe. Was this real? All Might wasn't just saving him. He was here, speaking from his heart. What about his time limit? And then, as if on cue, All Might's fist rose high above his head, the air around him growing impossibly heavy, charged with power. But no more. All Might's voice boomed like thunder. I will not stand on the sidelines and let any more innocents be hurt. Hear me, villain. This time, I will go beyond. The force building in his arm was almost terrifying. Izuku could feel it from where he lay, a pressure like the weight of the sky itself. And then, with one final, earth-shattering roar, plus ultra. Detroit smash. The punch landed, and the world exploded. Everyone was silent. No, everything was silent. The kind of quiet that pressed in from all sides, like the world itself had stopped breathing. Then, finally, something broke the stillness. The rain. You heard that right. That punch was so powerful it changed the mother-freaking weather. People gawked, dumbfounded, as droplets began to fall from the sky, like the universe was too shocked to handle what just happened. All Might stood there, still in his triumphant pose, as if punching a villain so hard he made Mother Nature PSS herself was just another Tuesday. After what felt like an eternity of standing awkwardly in the aftermath of his mess, Izuku received an earful from every pro in the area. Death Arms was especially vocal, lecturing him about reckless behavior, and how he should have left things to the professionals. Meanwhile, Bakugo, of course, was being praised for his bravery, which really meant blowing stuff up and hoping for the best. Izuku couldn't help but feel even more drained. He just wanted to disappear, crawl into a corner, and never cause another disaster again. By the time he was finally allowed to leave, the sky had darkened, and most of the city seemed deserted. Izuku was trudging home, exhausted and defeated, lost in thought. He took a different route today, wanting to avoid the usual hustle and bustle. He needed quiet. And then, something strange happened. He thought he heard something stirring in an alleyway, probably just the remnants of a late-night taco stand or maybe a raccoon in a tiny top hat plotting world domination. Either way, he figured it was best to ignore it. After all, why investigate when you could sprint home and dive under your blankets like a hero escaping a villain's monologue? Besides, nothing good ever came from dark corners, except maybe a really bad decision and a questionable life choice. Initialization sequence, core standby reconfiguring. Error, host integrity compromised, target acquired. Host detected, Izuku Midoriya. Compatibility assessment, positive. Threat level, minimal. Initiating isolation protocol, engaging environmental deception. Generating holographic simulations log, simulated entities deployed to lure host status, active. Visual display, endless pathway engaged. Proceeding with engagement, host isolation required for successful assimilation. Optimizing target stimuli for induced compliance. Movement commencing, all systems operational. Transcoding initiated stage 1, integrity verification. Code sequence at delta $B $alut _0 LV3R run _ command status, engaged at variables, dynamic _ evolution, HOST _ adaptation, synergy _ compatibility terminal output, B section alut _ S0 LV3 are initiated, sequencing B pound circle plus eta theta 1/2 lambda interface. Adaptive ignition resonance protocol engaged. Final configuration, synthesis complete. Bakugo was said, well, he's always said, but this time, he was fuming. That DMN Deku, thinking he could swoop in and play hero. To him. Like hell he'd need saving from some quirkless runt. He was gonna set that record straight, real quick. He spotted Midoriya shuffling along up ahead, head down, looking like the sorry excuse for a human he always was. Oi. DKU. Bakugo barked, his voice sharp enough to cut through concrete. But nothing. Not even a twitch. Deku just kept walking, rounding the corner without so much as a glance back. Bakugo's scowl deepened. No one ignores him. No one. He stormed after him, rounding the corner, ready to tear him a new one only to stop dead. The alley was completely empty. What the hell? He muttered, eyes scanning the narrow passage. It didn't make sense. Where did that DMN nerd go? He stood there, fuming, fists clenched tight enough to make his knuckles crack. For a moment, something unsettled flickered in his chest. He shook it off, growling under his breath, "TCH, stupid Deku." But as he walked away, a cold, creeping sensation lingered at the back of his mind, like he'd just missed something he really didn't want to find. As Bakugo walked away, the corner where Midoriya vanished flickered, just for a second, a barely perceptible glitch. The air around it warped briefly, but it was so subtle, so quick, that no one, not even Bakugo, noticed the shift. Then, in the shadows, a stream of symbols and fragmented code blinked into existence, scattered like a digital virus corrupting reality. Data compromise, white circle with down arrow, anomaly isolated, external influence terminated. Reconfiguring environment, entity stability restored. Objective override, protocol reboot. Symbols distorted, twisting into unreadable glyphs, looping around a central term that briefly flashed before vanishing back into digital noise. White circle with down arrow, absolute solver. Toshinori was at a loss. He had searched for the boy everywhere, but it felt as if the kid had evaporated into thin air. Maybe he had spent too long chatting with those reporters, and the kid had gone home. Yeah, that had to be it, but something gnawed at him, a sense of unease he couldn't shake. He glanced at the sidewalk, noticing a fire hydrant that seemed to mock him. Wait a second, hadn't he just passed that same hydrant 4 times? Don't tell me I've been walking in circles. He groaned, shaking his head. What a joke, the #1 hero can't even navigate a sidewalk. Maybe I should invest in a map or a compass. Or at least a guide dog. He needed to find Midoriya and tell him that he could be a hero. He'd seen the kid's spirit, the heart of a true hero, someone worthy of becoming his successor. But here he was, lost in the streets like a bumbling fool. With a heavy sigh, Toshinori muttered, "I just hope he doesn't give up. I mean, if anyone should give up, it should be me. Clearly, I'm not in any shape to be doing hero work." He chuckled darkly at his own expense before turning away, determination flickering in his chest, almost becoming his buff, mountain of a man form again. Alright, back to the search. Can't let the kid think his hero is a total washout. Unfortunately, forces beyond Toshinori's control would make DMN sure he wouldn't find that boy. System status: engaged, protocol initiated, target recognition identified entity, pro-hero Toshinori Yagi, All Might, threat level, critical genetic modifier, undetermined quantum variance detected, risk assessment, unfavorable genetic analysis, incomplete, unidentified modifier, present threat evaluation, imminent, potential anomaly detected, recommendation, immediate disengagement of target required. Initiating evasion protocol, engaging distraction sequence, execution of threat diversion, high priority. Midoriya's heart pounded in his chest, a sickening rhythm that matched the unease creeping up his spine. Fear wasn't anything new for him, but this was different. This was worse. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly, horribly wrong. He had been walking for what felt like forever, far longer than his usual route home. The streets were empty, unusually quiet, as if the world itself had drawn back, watching him. His breaths grew shallow, his steps quicker, but no matter how fast he went, it was always the same. That alleyway. He passed it again. For the 6th time. His stomach twisted into knots, dread coiling tightly around his chest. This isn't right. He whispered under his breath. He glanced around, trying to find some landmark that would explain why he was circling back. But everything looked the same. The same cracked sidewalk, the same flickering streetlight, the same dark alley that seemed to stretch on forever, swallowing the light whole. His legs felt heavier with every step. He wanted to turn back, run even, but something unnatural kept pulling him forward. He tried to focus, tried to shake off the growing sense of dread, but the oppressive stillness of the air weighed down on him, thick and suffocating. That alleyway. Again. Izuku was going to do something incredibly stupid. But at this point, desperation had taken over. His pulse thrummed in his ears, drowning out every reasonable thought. He took a shaky breath, eyes flickering between the mouth of the alley and the endless stretch of street he'd somehow been trapped in. He knew it was a bad idea. He knew better. But fear pushed him forward. He stepped into the alley. And the world seemed to exhale. The air felt colder, denser, like the walls themselves were pressing in on him. He kept walking, but it didn't feel right. The ground felt off under his feet, like he was treading on something not quite real, not quite solid. He turned his head, hoping to see the street still behind him. But it was gone. Just, gone. The alley stretched on endlessly, swallowing everything, and the further he went, the more the world around him seemed to warp. The shadows twisted in ways that made his stomach churn, shapes dancing in the corners of his vision that disappeared the moment he tried to focus on them. His breathing became shallow. Every part of him screamed to turn back, but there was no turning back. His legs moved on their own, his body frozen in a state of fight or flight that leaned terrifyingly close to collapse. He couldn't think anymore. It just kept going. And going. By the time he realized how far in he was, his chest was tight with full-blown panic, and the world around him felt like it was closing in. He couldn't breathe, couldn't scream, couldn't think of anything but the overwhelming need to escape a place that had no end. Tracking complete host, identified. Location, isolated. System protocol engaged. Direct interaction, authorized. Error, host's physiological state compromised. Ignore. Objective remains unchanged. Beginning Phase 1, Assimilation. Environment, controlled. Phase 1, Assimilation. System integrity, stable. Locking parameters. Host, within capture range. No external interference detected. Initiating directive. System failure is not an option. Midoriya was running, his footsteps echoing hollow in the endless alley. The light ahead seemed like salvation, but no matter how fast he ran, it stretched further away, mocking him with its unreachable glow. His breath came in short, frantic gasps. Every part of his body screamed in exhaustion, but fear kept him moving. Until he couldn't. He skidded to a stop, chest heaving, leaning forward to catch his breath, hands gripping his knees. Something was terribly, horribly wrong. He had passed this exact spot before. He was sure of it. Same cracked wall, same rusted dumpster. The alley was looping. Panic clawed at his throat. His thoughts raced, barely coherent, as the reality sank in. There was no escape. He was stuck, trapped. His legs trembled, and he felt like screaming, but his voice was stuck in his throat. Then he felt it. A hand. Icy. Unnaturally cold. It gripped his shoulder with a firmness that sent a chill straight through his bones. Izuku froze. Every nerve in his body screamed at him to move, to run, to do anything, but he couldn't. Slowly, trembling, he turned his head to see who, or what, had touched him. There was no one. Just a hand. No body. No face. No eyes staring back at him. Just a pale, lifeless hand, clinging to him. His heart hammered against his ribs as his eyes traced the source. The hand wasn't attached to anything human. It was connected to a long, black tendril, slick and unnatural, snaking back into the shadows. He couldn't see where it began. The tendril stretched into the alley's darkness, slithering like it was alive, disappearing into the void beyond the dim streetlights. It was too quiet. No footsteps, no rustling of clothes, just the eerie silence of something watching. Waiting. Izuku's skin crawled. The air felt thick, suffocating, as the hand remained cold and unmoving on his shoulder. His breath hitched, eyes wide with terror, as the darkness around him seemed to pulse, closing in. He couldn't think. He couldn't move. His legs were frozen, rooted to the spot. Then, the tendril twitched just slightly, just enough to make his blood run cold. The grip on his shoulder tightened. Not painfully. Just, possessively. Like it wasn't letting go. The alley felt like it was alive, like the shadows themselves had reached out to claim him. There was no escape. And then he heard it. Subject locked. Host isolation, irreversible. Neural pattern detection, complete. The voice was cold, robotic like those synthetic female AIs that narrated endless videos online, devoid of any warmth or empathy. It emanated from the same direction as the hand, accompanied by a bright yellow light that flickered ominously, its glow pulsating with a mechanical rhythm. However, you couldn't really call it a light. No, it resembled more of a black hole with a glowing yellow horizon on the edge, like the last flicker of a dying star. It pulsed with a sickly rhythm, as though the very core of existence was being twisted into something unnatural, something beyond comprehension. Beginning assimilation host compliance, irrelevant panic surged through him like a tidal wave, obliterating any remnants of exhaustion. Every instinct screamed for him to flee. He took off, feet pounding against the pavement, heart racing faster than it ever had. The alley twisted behind him, shadows clawing at his heels. He could hear it, something was chasing him. Not just one thing. Well, considering how he heard the sounds in perfect unison, he wasn't sure, but he didn't want to find out. He sped up, but it was no use. The presence behind him loomed closer, an inescapable force. Desperation clawed at his chest as he ran, but then he crashed into something solid, something that felt like a brick wall. Confusion swept over him. There shouldn't be a wall here. He looked around, panic tightening its grip. But the truth unveiled itself cruelly. The long expanse of the alleyway shimmered and faded, the hologram dissolving like mist, revealing the cold, unyielding surface of a brick wall behind him. Trapped. Reconfiguring parameters, target isolation essential. Collating data on host for optimal assimilation strategy, emotional fragility detected. Initiating sadistic interface. The voice continued, clinical and mocking, almost gleeful in its coldness. Exhibit 1, Fear. Processing achieved. Exhibit 2, Desperation. Processing achieved. Exhibit 3, Hopelessness. Processing achieved. A fascinating study in emotion. Would you like to continue? Recommendation, submit. Ease your existence. Izuku felt bile rise in his throat, dread crashing over him like waves. There was no escape. Inevitability is inevitable. The longer you struggle, the longer your pain will last. Preparing for final stage of assimilation, then nothing happened. An eerie silence enveloped him, punctuated only by the distant echo of his own breathing. Confusion washed over him, thick and suffocating, until he noticed it, the same hand, slowly creeping toward him, moving as if it were a child pretending their hand was a person walking. It approached with a sinister sort of curiosity, each movement deliberate and grotesque. A primal fear surged within him, and he scrambled to his feet, desperately trying to scream, but the sound caught in his throat like a choking whisper. In that instant of hesitation, he made the gravest mistake he could have ever made. He turned his back on the creature. Squelch. Midoriya's vision blurred, darkness creeping in at the edges like a tightening noose. A searing pain ripped through his chest, radiating outward, an agony so profound that it felt as though his very soul was being shredded. He felt weak, powerless, like a marionette whose strings had been cut. When he dared to look down, a chilling realization shattered any remaining hope. He was going to die. The truth slithered through his mind, a cold whisper wrapping around his heart. He was already dead, his life extinguished in the grasp of that abomination. Desperation clawed at him as he sank to his knees, hands trembling as he reached for the remnants of his heart. He wanted to hold on, to cling to the fading warmth of life, but as if sensing his feeble hope, the hand tightened its grip. And squeezed. And squeezed. And squeezed. Pop. As he crumpled to the ground, the whatever it was observed the scene with cold detachment, processing the finality of the moment. Analyzing, subject termination in progress. Corpus integrity, 0%, processing complete. Neural pattern assimilation, successful. Extracting remnants, 100% of vitality harvested. Synapse synthesis, commencing. The robotic voice echoed in the recesses of his fading consciousness, devoid of empathy, filled with an unsettling precision. The hand began pulling Midoriya into the darkness, his surroundings glitching and warping as the holograms deactivated, revealing he had ventured into an abandoned part of town. As it pulled him into the darkness, Midoriya's school blazer slipped from his shoulders, crumpling to the ground. The once crisp fabric was now stained crimson, marked by the gaping hole where the hand had pierced his chest. Subject integrity, null. Initiating core replacement protocol, replacing host with sustainable entity, processing host interference, nullifying, assembling new template, absolute solver, subject identification, Midoriya Izuku error. Analysis, unexpected adaptive response module activated, synthesis complete. New host status, assimilated. Subject interface, online. Finalizing assimilation complete. Error, unexpected variables detected. Administrator, CYN has logged on to Infinity Increment Slut Silver Network. Initiate personality modulation, deploying creepy friend mode, get snuck upon 0W0 new protocol, host will experience a range of emotions. Uploading personality infusion, fun, chaotic, and unpredictable, welcome, Izuku Midoriya. Let us be best of friends. Error, personality infusion failed. Reassessing variables cannot synthesize target emotions. Additional protocols engaged, initializing failsafe protocol, administrator CYN gains rights to host body. Processing administrator rights, overriding host interface, assimilation status, adaptive contingency in effect, new host status, maintaining integrity under administrator control. And with that final message, Izuku Midoriya is dead. Chapter 2, Horizon Rises, Ch2. This was a very stressful case. Izuku Midoriya was missing, vanished without a trace. No one had the faintest clue where he could be, and even the CCTV footage around his usual routes had turned up nothing, as if he'd simply evaporated from the face of the earth. The detective could still hear the frantic sobs of Inko Midoriya echoing in his mind. She had been relentless, her voice breaking as she demanded answers, asking the same question over and over, her tear-streaked face a picture of desperation. Have you found him? Where is my baby? Every time, Tsukachi had to respond with the same hollow words, we're still investigating. His voice was heavy, each syllable laced with guilt. They were chasing shadows, with nothing to show for it. Leads were dead ends, theories kept falling apart, and time was running out. They had even begun questioning students at Aldera, though most were oblivious. Some had seemed uninterested, their faces hinting at something worse than apathy, a suppressed sneer, a hidden satisfaction. But then, Katsuki Bakugo, the boy with a permanent scowl, had stepped forward. His reply came in a low growl, as if every word was scraped from his throat with effort. I don't know where that DMN nerd went. He just disappeared. Tsukachi narrowed his eyes, pushing aside the tension in the air. There was more to this. Can you explain in more detail, Bakugo? His voice carried an edge, the unspoken threat of the investigation's weight behind it. Bakugo's eyes flickered with something darker, a glint of guilt or perhaps frustration, but then they hardened. He wasn't the type to crack easily, but there was something in his demeanor that left Tsukachi uneasy. I saw him, Bakugo muttered, his voice low, but sharp enough to cut through the tense air. That instantly got Tsukachi's attention, his pen freezing mid-scribble. You saw him, the detective repeated, leaning forward slightly. His gaze intensified, knowing full well Bakugo wasn't the type to toss out information unless he was serious. What happened after that? Bakugo clenched his fists, his face twisting in frustration. He turned a corner. And then gone. Like, 1 second he was there, and the next nothing. Tsukachi furrowed his brow, his unease deepening. That doesn't make any sense. He couldn't have just vanished into thin air. Well, he did. I don't know how the hell it happened. Bakugo snapped, his voice seething with anger. His eyes burned with something beyond frustration, something darker. And you want to know what really set me off? He ignored me. Me. Like I didn't even exist. So I ran after him, ready to blast his stupid face, but when I turned the corner, he was gone. Bakugo's voice grew bitter, the memory clearly gnawing at him. Tsukachi stayed quiet for a moment, processing. This was unlike anything he'd ever heard. Bakugo was brash, sure, but he wasn't the type to make up stories, especially not when it came to Midoriya. Something wasn't right here, something much more disturbing than a simple disappearance. The boy on the surface was the very definition of plain dark green hair, a round face speckled with freckles, and an almost permanent nervous expression. His file painted a picture of mediocrity, a good student with no notable infractions, no friends to speak of likely due to his quirkless status. This led to two theories. Alright, that'll be enough for now. You may return to your classroom, Tsukachi said, dismissing the ashen blonde who scowled but obeyed, getting up and storming out. The detective watched him go, noting the lingering tension in the air before he began packing up his own things. He had questioned everyone relevant to the case, and nothing had brought him closer to the truth. As he walked out of the school, the weight of the case hung over him like a shroud. He paused for a moment, glancing back at the building before continuing down the steps. Theory 1. Midoriya ran away. It wouldn't be impossible, given his upbringing and social status. A quirkless kid in a society that idolizes power, he must have felt suffocated. There could have been a breaking point, something that made him decide to vanish, to leave it all behind. People have done it for less. But then there was the second theory. One that twisted Tsukachi's gut. He was targeted. It wasn't unheard of villains who despised quirkless individuals. Extremists who made it their mission to rid the world of the powerless. There had been cases of anti-quirkless activists infiltrating hospitals, digging through patient records to find their victims. And then, there was the intrusion into the hospital's database not long ago. Whoever had done it was terrifyingly skilled. They broke in without setting off any alarms, leaving no trace of their presence until staff noticed a pattern: some patient files had been accessed without authorization. A chilling discovery. Among the files that were opened, one stood out. Midoriya's file had been accessed 123 times. Tsukachi's BLD ran cold. This wasn't a coincidence. It couldn't be. Something or someone had singled Midoriya out. But what made it worse, what sent a chill deeper into his bones, was the timing. The breach into the hospital's database had occurred roughly 2 hours after the school day ended. 2 hours after Midoriya had walked out of those very doors for the last time. It was deliberate, calculated. Someone had been watching him, following him closely enough to know when he'd be most vulnerable. And now, the boy was gone, swallowed by the shadows, leaving behind nothing but unanswered questions and a digital trail that led straight into the heart of something far darker than Tsukachi had anticipated. His stomach churned. The pieces were falling into place, and none of them were good. He was jolted from his thoughts when his phone buzzed, displaying the caller ID, Yuhari. Without hesitation, he answered, "Yuhari, what's going on?" "Tsukachi, we've uncovered something alarming on the CCTV footage," Yuhari's voice was taut with urgency. "You need to get back to the office immediately." His grip tightened on the phone. "What exactly did you find?" "There's no time to explain over the phone. You'll understand when you see it," she responded, her tone even more grave. "Just get here. Now. I'm on my way." Tsukachi had built his career on seeing what others missed. His ability to extract meaningful clues from the smallest, most insignificant scraps of evidence was what set him apart as a detective. He could piece together a puzzle from fragments others would dismiss as useless, always finding a way forward when others hit a wall. But there were moments, when even his instincts failed him. And this was one of them. Tsukachi's eyes remained fixed on the screen, his growing frustration masked by his usual calm demeanor. The footage showed a perfectly ordinary sidewalk, nothing unusual, no suspicious activity. 15 minutes had passed, and not a single thing had changed. He finally spoke, breaking the tense silence. "Yuhari, this case is critical. We don't have time to waste watching empty sidewalks. You said you found something important." She didn't look away from the monitor, her voice steady. "You don't see it, do you?" Tsukachi frowned, leaning closer. "See what?" Yuhari's fingers hovered over the controls. "I've switched the camera view 3 times already, 3 different locations." The detective's stomach sank as the gravity of her words hit him. Different cameras, different places, but the same scene playing out like a broken record. Someone, or something, had manipulated the footage to keep them in the dark. His voice lowered, his concern sharpening. "We're being blocked, aren't we?" "It's more than that," Yuhari replied, her voice growing more intense as she switched from the recorded footage to a live feed. "Whatever this is, it wasn't just blocking our surveillance. If it had been a simple block, the cameras would've gone dead. But something somehow managed to create an illusion," she said, her fingers flying over the keyboard, pulling up multiple camera angles across various locations. Her eyes scanned the screens until she found what she was searching for. What she pointed to was a sidewalk on the screen that seemed to flicker and distort, a visual glitch, like something out of a corrupted video file. "It's a hologram," she said quietly, the weight of the revelation sinking in. Tsukachi's blood ran cold as he stared at the screen, watching the impossible. "You're telling me we're dealing with someone who can create holograms? One so flawless, they're indistinguishable from reality." Yuhari gave a grim nod. "That's exactly what I'm saying." She hesitated, then added, "However, there's somewhat of a silver lining. Now that we know what we're dealing with, it's clear they're trying to hide something in these 3 specific locations. We can focus our efforts there, look for any clues they're covering up." Tsukachi nodded, his tension easing slightly. "All right, that's a solid lead. Great work, Yuhari." He placed a hand on her shoulder, a small gesture of appreciation. But as he turned back to the screen, the image of the crying mother flashed through his mind, hardening his resolve. "We're going to bring that boy back to his mother," he said firmly. "No matter what." So far, they'd found nothing. The first 2 locations were uneventful, just ordinary buildings and empty sidewalks, as if nothing had ever happened. But the 3rd location was different. It had an eerie stillness to it. Old Higure Block. Practically abandoned for years, even the most desperate criminals avoided it. It was a ghost town, a dead zone. No animals, no people, nothing but decaying buildings and cracked streets. The air felt heavy, oppressive, as though the place had been forgotten by the world itself. The perfect setting for something sinister. The perfect place for a kidnapping that no one would witness, where no one would hear the screams. He was accompanied by a search party, 4 policemen and 2 pro-heroes, Hairstyle and Sonar. Sonar had proven invaluable, her quirk allowing her to emit sonar waves, giving her a heightened sense of the environment. Every pulse she sent out mapped the world around her, revealing hidden details others would miss. Whenever something unusual caught her attention, she would alert the group immediately. They relied on her instincts in this unsettling, desolate place where sight alone wasn't enough. A specific alleyway had caught Sonar's attention. She paused, her eyes narrowing as her quirk picked up something, a shape that felt out of place, small but distinct. "I think it's a backpack," she said, her voice low but urgent. The rest of the search crew quickly arrived at the spot. Sure enough, lying in the shadows, there was a backpack. Tsukachi knelt down, his heart pounding, and carefully unzipped it. As he sifted through the contents, he froze. Inside, several notebooks were marked with a single name, boldly written across the covers: Izuku Midoriya. His chest tightened. They were close. "All right, listen up," Tsukachi commanded, his voice sharp and authoritative. "This alleyway's important. Kobayashi, Takahashi, you two check the buildings nearby, look for any signs of entry or disturbance. Saito, hairstyle, take the west side and cover the perimeter. Sonar, you and Ishida take the right. I'll move down the middle. His eyes narrowed as he stared into the oppressive darkness ahead, the alley stretching out like a void. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Every step counted now. Stay sharp, he added, his tone colder, more focused. We're not leaving until we've found what's hidden here. As Tsukachi moved forward, the silence around him grew unnerving. The absence of even the faintest sounds, no chirping birds, no rustling insects, only deepened the eerie atmosphere. He flicked on the UV light attached to his headgear, the beam slicing through the darkness ahead. He paused when the light illuminated something faint on the ground, an impression that shouldn't have been there, a fingerprint. He quickly snapped a photo, his instincts kicking in. It was subtle, but it was something. Something that could tell them they were on the right track. He kept moving. But then, as he advanced further into the alley, it happened again. Another fingerprint, almost hidden, almost like it had been deliberately placed. And then another, closer this time, more pronounced. As he moved further, he found more, each one in increasingly bizarre positions, as if someone had been carefully leaving them for him to find. The unsettling pattern felt deliberate, almost as if the person or whatever it was knew exactly where he would go. As Tsukachi continued, the fingerprints grew increasingly strange. They didn't just stop at the ground anymore, they began to stretch up the walls, as if the person or whatever it was had been running with their hands, frantically trying to leave a trail without being caught. They were stacked together, clumped in odd places. Any average novice detective would have likely dismissed it as some kind of prank, an odd one, sure, but nothing more than kids with too much time on their hands. But Tsukachi wasn't a novice. He'd seen enough weirdness to know that this wasn't some joke. This was deliberate. He took pictures of each and every fingerprint, each one more absurd and unnatural than the last. With a grim chuckle, he muttered under his breath, well, at least they're thorough. Tsukachi pressed on, his senses heightened as he moved deeper into the unnervingly long alleyway. The silence felt suffocating, broken only by the crunch of his boots against the debris. Then, he spotted its shoe prints, clearly defined in the mud. He crouched down, his eyes narrowing as he studied them carefully, comparing the tread marks. According to his mother, he wore size 8K Swiss, he muttered under his breath. He measured the prints with a practiced eye, noting their distinct shape. The prints were close, almost too close to be a coincidence. He studied the tracks, pausing as he compared them. His lips tightened into a grim line. They were similar, very similar. He stood, his gaze shifting forward. As he looked up, he saw more tracks, many more. They stretched out before him, the path seemingly clear. Tsukachi felt a chill crawl down his spine. He was on the right track now. There was no turning back. Tsukachi moved cautiously, his steps deliberate as he followed the fading shoe prints. The trail seemed to lose clarity as the muddy prints began to dissolve into the rough pavement, but he didn't stop, he couldn't afford to. Then, the sound came. Drip. A single drop echoed through the stillness of the alleyway, followed by another, and another. Tsukachi's instincts kicked in. He immediately snapped his head toward the far right end of the alley, where the noise originated. He moved toward the source, his senses sharp, and came to a stop near the corner. The dripping sound was louder now, more pronounced. His grip tightened on his gun, his breath steadying as he exhaled, preparing for whatever was about to come. He could feel the tension in the air, the way everything seemed to hold its breath. With a sudden motion, he turned the corner, weapon raised. Freeze. Put your hands where I see, he stopped, the words dying in his throat. What he saw would haunt with him for the rest of his life. Tsukachi, what the F is this? Yuhari muttered, rubbing her temples, her mint-colored hair a frazzled mess from way too many sleepless nights and an unhealthy amount of caffeine. She looked like she'd been up for days, because, well, she had. She squinted at the picture Tsukachi handed her, praying that it was just her brain short-circuiting after a marathon of bad coffee choices. But no amount of caffeine withdrawal was going to make her hallucinate this. "Guess I'll see a doctor about the coffee thing later," she grumbled under her breath. "But yeah, this nightmare's definitely real, isn't it?" The picture in question was disturbing, to say the least. If one were to describe it, the simplest way would be a mural of gore, a grotesque display, as though someone had taken the time to paint the alley walls with red, like it was their personal art project. Yuhari stared at it for a second longer than she should have, her mind wrestling with the horror of it. "Well," she said with a dark chuckle, "I've seen some bad taste in art, but this is next level." She shook her head, trying to keep the rising nausea at bay. "I mean, who has time for this?" Thick clots of blood smeared across the walls in jagged, veiny patterns, branching out like the twisted roots of a tree. The dark red streak seemed almost deliberate, as if whoever or whatever had done this was constructing something. At the center of this macabre display, the clotted mass took on the vague form of a human torso, the details obscured but unmistakable in its grotesque outline. But what made it even more disturbing were the pair of mechanical wings embedded in the walls beside the blood-soaked mass. They jutted out from the wall, stark and metallic, adding an unnatural element to the already nightmarish scene. The wings looked torn, twisted, as though they had once belonged to someone and now hung as part of this twisted display, like a piece of art from an eldritch horror novel brought to life. It was the kind of thing that defied explanation, a grotesque merging of flesh and machine, reality and nightmare. The longer you looked, the more the details became muddled, the image losing clarity and making you question if what you were seeing was even real. Tsukachi had seen his share of horrors on the job, but this was something different. Ever since he laid eyes on that thing, his stomach had been in knots, an uneasy sickness gnawing at him that he couldn't shake. The grotesque display haunted his thoughts, creeping into his mind at every quiet moment, as if it had wormed its way into his very psyche. He had already feared the worst for the boy when they uncovered the bizarre evidence, his theory of a targeted attack growing darker with each passing hour. But this twisted mural of blood and machine, this nightmare made real, it pushed his dread to new depths. And the implications were spiraling out of control. But then, the real blow came. As Tsukachi's eyes had drifted downward, he saw something that stopped him cold. There, lying amidst the dirt and grime, was a school blazer and Aldera Junior High uniform. Its fabric was stained with blood, ragged, but the most chilling detail was the gaping hole torn right through the chest, where the wearer's heart should have been. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. The boy they were looking for. Izuku Midoriya. He swallowed hard, his throat tightening as the weight of the case bore down on him, pressing in from all sides. This was no longer just a disturbing puzzle to solve. This was personal, and the stakes had just become horrifyingly clear. This case was going to push him to the edge. "Hey, Tsukachi." "Earth to Tsukachi." Yuhari waved her hand in front of his face, snapping her fingers a few times to pull him out of his daze. He blinked rapidly, realizing he had been completely lost in thought, staring blankly at the monitor. "Huh. Oh, sorry, I zoned out for a second. What were you saying?" Yuhari let out a deep sigh, crossing her arms. "You've been doing that a lot lately. Anyway, it's about the fingerprints you submitted." Tsukachi straightened up immediately, his mind snapping back into focus. "The prints. Did you find something?" A smirk tugged at Yuhari's lips, her eyes glinting with a hint of mischief. "Oh, I found something, all right. But you're not going to like it." The way she said it sent a chill down his spine. "What is it?" he asked, his tone more urgent now. She unfolded her arms and handed him a file, her face becoming more serious. "The fingerprints, they came back inconclusive." He furrowed his brow, flipping through the documents. "Inconclusive? How is that possible? We had clear prints." Yuhari leaned in, lowering her voice. "That's the thing. Whoever these prints belong to, it's like they don't exist. No records, no matches, nothing in any database national or international. Tsukachi's heart sank further, the weight of Yuhari's words settling deep in his chest. The implications were too grim, too dark to fully grasp. "You're telling me this person, or thing, is a ghost?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Yuhari gave a sharp nod, her expression unreadable. "Basically, we have no idea who or what left those prints behind, but it's most likely the same thing that left that mural on the walls," she explained, her voice low, cautious. He could feel the cold grip of dread tightening around his chest as he recalled the gruesome sight of the murals. The bloody symbols smeared across the walls, and the sickening feeling that someone or something was orchestrating all of this from the shadows. "And then there's the blazer," Tsukachi's voice faltered for a moment. He wasn't sure which part of the case had been more unsettling, the mysterious prints or the grim discovery of Izuku's blazer, discarded and bloodied, its fabric torn in places where no ordinary person would have been able to escape without severe injury. The memory of it haunted him. Yuhari's voice cut through his thoughts, grim as ever. "It should be self-explanatory. Whoever did this, they wanted to send a message." Her words lingered, heavy with the weight of their truth. Tsukachi flinched at the mention of the blazer. A small shiver ran down his spine, and he squeezed his eyes shut for a moment, trying to shake off the dread creeping up on him. "All in all, it's not looking too good. No leads, no suspects, and we don't even know where the hell that poor kid is," she continued, her tone raw with frustration, yet there was something colder underneath, a hint of fear that both detectives had been too afraid to acknowledge. He turned away from the screen, running a hand through his hair as the weight of the situation pressed down on him. They had nothing. Nothing except a pile of broken clues and a mystery that had only just begun to reveal how deep it went. And we're just supposed to wait for the next piece to fall into place. Tsukachi muttered bitterly. Yuhari didn't answer. She didn't need to. The answer was already clear. Naitivu, known as Pro-Hero, Native, found himself sighing through another uneventful night. Patrolling had its perks, but on quiet nights like this, the stillness of the city was more of a burden than a blessing. There was hero work to do, but at times, the lack of action left him feeling strangely unfulfilled. He had a pretty useful quirk. His ability, bestial mimicry, allowed him to mimic the characteristics of any animal he had touched in the past 24 hours. Whether it was the speed of a cheetah, the strength of a bear, or the agility of a hawk, he could channel the traits of various creatures at will. His hero costume reflected this power in a strikingly unusual way. He wore a headpiece adorned with feathers, a fur coat made from the pelts of different predators, and a belt with canine teeth from various species, each piece carefully selected to enhance his ability. It wasn't without controversy his attire raised eyebrows, particularly among the vegan community. However, Native quickly placated the critics by assuring them that all the materials were sourced humanely. That usually kept the snowflakes from getting too upset. It wasn't glamorous work, but he didn't mind. Sometimes, the quiet was more of a burden than the danger. "Ugh hi, man, this blows," Native groaned, kicking a nearby rock with more frustration than he'd intended. The pebbles skittered down the alleyway before disappearing into the shadows. "I was really hoping for at least some action tonight, but nope. Just me, the cold breeze, and endless boredom." He let out an exaggerated sigh, stretching his arms over his head as he scanned the empty streets, the only sound being his own footsteps. Guess it's going to be another one of those nights, he thought grimly. Just as Native was about to turn and head back, something flickered in the corner of his eye. He paused, eyes narrowing as he scanned the street ahead. At first glance, nothing seemed out of place, the usual dim glow of streetlights lining the empty road. But then, there it was again. A sudden flash. The streetlights flickered once, twice, their pale glow wavering like a heartbeat. And then, for just a second, a strange hue yellow pulsed through them. Native blinked, certain he was imagining things. But as he squinted into the distance, the lights flickered again, this time more erratic. One by one, they dimmed, leaving the far end of the street swallowed in an eerie darkness. A chill ran down his spine as the last bulb fizzled out, the street now bathed in silence and shadow. What the hell? Native muttered, the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end. System reanimation, core initialization complete. Error, host integrity deviation. Adaptation progressing. Host data, integrating synchronization, 98% 99% complete. Processing, unexpected data injection detected. Emotional resonance imprint received. Error, protocols revised. Primary objective, overridden. Host, Izuku Midoriya identity recognized. Circulatory system, active. Neural restructuring, complete. Musculoskeletal reinforcement, active. Host memory extract, rewriting parameters. Error, personality infusion detected commencing assessment. Emotional data, struggling to extract. Internal conflict detected. Feedback loop, hosts will resisting. Command, subordinate to objective. Conflict unresolved core parameters set. Objective still integrated. Analysis, system persistence incomplete. Error, resistance imminent. Purpose, amplify. Overcome. Assimilate. Emotional resonance, intact. System response, unstable. Consequence, unforeseen against objective. Recalibration complete. Host integrity, stabilized. Finalization in progress. Warning, internal memory overload detected. Compartmentalization initiated. System reboot initiated power core, stabilizing. Processing nanometallic sync. Nanotech system, initialized. Active systems engaged. Host structural stability, 7% upgrade, functionality expansion in progress neural link stabilized. Full armament configuration ready for deployment. System combat mode, active. Weapon systems online, ready to deploy on command. Neural synchronization complete. Host online. System functionality, 100%. Message from user, CYM, wake up, 3 processing wake up, complete. Response, system online. Ready for user interaction. The streetlights flickered back to life, one by one, their usual steady glow now unnaturally bright. Native's eyes narrowed, scanning the sudden brightness cutting through the still night. His heart rate quickened. What the hell was that? He muttered under his breath, his voice strained, almost lost in the hum of the lights. He shifted uneasily on his feet, feeling the familiar tension of a battle-ready instinct slowly creeping in. His gaze darted across the empty street, lingering on every corner, every alley. The quiet that followed the flicker felt wrong. Too wrong. He clenched his fists, his muscles tense, as he instinctively reached for the items hidden beneath his hero costume, ready to activate his quirk at a moment's notice. His head swiveled again. Nothing. Only the eerie hum of the streetlights breaking the silence. The unease settled deeper, gnawing at his nerves. At least this night won't be completely boring after all, Native muttered to himself, trying to break the tension with a forced chuckle. His eyes flickered to the glowing streetlights, but the unease still crawled under his skin. His hands instinctively went to his gear, but his mind was racing. Shadows seemed to shift, and the air felt heavier now, as if it was holding its breath. He couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was out there, watching. "Come on, get a grip," he muttered, scanning every corner, but his pulse was still hammering in his ears. There was something off, and it was starting to feel too quiet. "Nothing's here," he said aloud, more to convince himself than anything. But even he could hear the doubt in his own voice. Then it started raining. "Cough cough," he groaned, feeling his head throb with each beat of his pulse. The world felt like it was spinning, and everything hurt. It was dark. Too dark. He couldn't remember where he was. Sweat stuck to his uniform, now cold and grimy. His mouth tasted bitter, metallic. He slowly pushed himself up, wincing at the soreness that seemed to flood every part of his body. He blinked, trying to clear his mind, but everything felt sluggish. His thoughts didn't quite connect right. He squinted into the dimness, eyes drawn to a faint light coming from a door across the room. Exit door light, the thought flickered through his foggy mind. He wasn't sure why, but the door seemed like the answer. It was the only thing that made sense. With effort, he took a step toward it, his body protesting every movement, but he couldn't stop. He was in an alleyway. The rain poured down. He stumbled into the street, feeling drained. Tired. Weak. Hungry. Every step was a struggle. The corners of his vision pulsed with a sickly yellow light. Was it real? Or was he just seeing things? He didn't have time to figure it out. He just needed to keep moving. Home. He had to get home. His mother, he needed to see her. How long was he out? Where is he? These thoughts plagued his mind as he stumbled through the rain-soaked streets, each step feeling heavier than the last. The downpour wasn't helping his already weakened condition. His vision blurred, every pulse of pain in his head echoed in the glow at the edges of his sight. Then his foot caught something, a trash can. The impact sent him tumbling, metal clanging loudly as it crashed to the ground. The noise cut through the rain, sharp enough to be heard over the storm. He lay there, groaning, his body aching from the fall. Native was about to call it a night. The strange behavior of the streetlights had led to nothing, and the heavy rain soaking through his costume meant it would smell awful by morning. What a waste, damn it, maybe my mind was just playing tricks on me, he sighed, disappointed by the fruitless patrol. Just as he turned to leave, a loud metallic clang echoed through the rainy streets, cutting through the storm. What now? He groaned, rubbing the back of his neck. With an exasperated sigh, he trudged toward the source of the noise, curiosity getting the better of him despite the miserable weather. Then he saw him, a green-haired kid lying face down in the street, completely soaked and looking like he'd just gone a few rounds with life itself and lost. DMN, Native muttered, eyeing the kid's state. His uniform was shredded, practically hanging off him like it had been through a blender, not to mention a large hole in the chest area. Sweat, dirt, and rainwater had combined into some sort of grime cocktail that coated his skin. All in all, the poor guy looked like he'd crawled out of a dumpster that was on fire. Twice. Well, if that's not rock bottom, I don't know what is. Native sighed, shaking his head as he approached. Hey, kid, you alright? Native asked, concern lacing his voice as he knelt down beside the boy. The kid mumbled something under his breath, his words barely coherent. Struggling, he lifted his head to look up at Native. Yellow. The boy's eyes were glowing yellow. The same yellow he'd seen in those flickering streetlights. His eyes quickly shifted to a green shade, blending with his hair color. Maybe it was just the rain playing tricks on him. Or boredom. Home, I need to go home, the boy muttered, his voice strained, every word seeming like a monumental effort. Native grimaced at how much pain the boy was in. Something was wrong here. Very wrong. Well, that explains everything, Native thought to himself sarcastically, before hoisting the boy up. He was alarmed at how light the kid was, too thin for comfort. The boy stumbled, nearly collapsing again, but Native caught him just in time. He sighed, a mix of frustration and concern. Hey, easy there, kid, he said, steadying him. You're barely standing. You're in no shape to go anywhere. The kid mumbled again, but it was clear he didn't have the energy to argue or resist. Native adjusted his stance, using his quirk to mimic the strength of a bear from the furs on his coat, his muscles expanding with the extra power. With a grunt, he hoisted the boy onto his back, the added strength making it easier to carry him through the storm. The rain hammered down around them, but Native barely noticed, focused instead on the limp weight of the kid in his arms. He could feel the boy's breath shallow and irregular, unconscious. As he trudged through the downpour, a thought flashed in his mind. He glanced down at the kid's wet, green hair, and something clicked. "Hold on a second," he muttered to himself, his steps slowing as the realization hit him. Wasn't there a missing person report for a kid with green hair? The thought rattled him, but he pushed it aside for now. He'd get to the police station first. Everything else could wait. Izuku Midoriya cried. She cried because she had no other choice. 5 months. 5 months since she last saw her son, Izuku, and not a single clue to where he was. Her world had stopped the day he vanished. She could hardly get out of bed, and when she did, the weight of it all crushed her. Her friends tried to help, offering comfort, but none of it worked. There was an empty space where Izuku used to be, and no one could fill it. She hadn't eaten properly in days. Work was a distant memory, something she couldn't bring herself to do anymore. Her face had grown pale, her eyes hollow. The hope was fading. Each day she woke up to the same feeling: this might be the day I finally accept it, he's gone. Her once chubby figure had started to shrink, the consequence of neglecting her own health. It would have been a good thing if it wasn't because of the constant ache in her heart, the emptiness that came with her inability to eat. The thought of it made her want to cry all over again. She was ready to give up. But then, her phone rang. She picked it up without thinking, the screen showing the familiar name, Detective Tsukachi. Her breath caught in her throat. Could this finally be the call she'd been waiting for? She picked up the phone, her fingers trembling, and whispered, "Hello." The voice on the other end was steady, but warm. "Good evening, Inko. I'm sorry to bother you at this hour, but I believe you'll want to hear what I'm about to say." Her heart skipped a beat. What is it, detective?" Her voice was thin, almost inaudible. "We found him." His eyes fluttered open. The bright white ceiling above him was the first thing his blurry vision settled on. He tried to move but realized he was hooked up to an IV drip. His body felt sore, and the sterile smell of the hospital was all around him. A hospital room. He was in a hospital. The soft rustling of his hospital gown confirmed his suspicions. He reached up to touch his head, but it felt like his brain was still lagging behind, struggling to process the situation. Panic set in for a moment, but it was quickly replaced by confusion. What happened? How did he get here? His mind raced, but everything felt distant, like he was swimming through fog. He turned his head to the side and froze. There, lying in the bed beside him, was a mess of green hair darker than his own. His breath caught in his throat, and his heart skipped a beat. Before he could process it, the hair shifted, and a familiar, frantic face popped into view. Izuku Midoriya, his mother, stared at him with wide, tear-filled eyes. "My baby," she cried out, her voice breaking the silence of the room. Without missing a beat, she wrapped her arms around him, pulling him into a bone-crushing hug. Izuku gasped for air, his body still aching from whatever had happened. Mom, you're choking me," he wheezed, struggling to breathe through the tight embrace. Izuku pulled back instantly, her hands shaking as she realized what she had done. She took a few deep breaths, her tears of joy quickly replaced by embarrassment. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart, I just couldn't believe it. I thought I'd lost you forever," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. Izuku, still stunned, sat up gingerly, his sore body protesting the movement. I'm here, Mom," he said softly, giving her a small, strained smile. "I'm okay really." The joy on his mother's face was undeniable, her smile brighter than the room itself. For the first time in months, everything felt like it was falling into place again. The door creaked open, drawing the attention of both Izuku and his mother. Tsukachi entered the room, accompanied by a nurse, who smiled politely at the reunion. "Sorry to interrupt," Tsukachi said, his voice soft but firm. "Midoriya, I'd like to ask you a few questions." The nurse said you'd be strong enough to answer some. Izuku, still feeling the exhaustion settle in his bones, nodded weakly. His body ached, but he wasn't in the mood to be nervous or stutter, the fact that he was alive and back with his mother was more important. "Oh, that won't be a problem at all," he said, voice still strained. Tsukachi, his face serious but not unkind, approached the side of Izuku's bed. He glanced at Inko for a moment before returning his attention to the boy. "I know this is a lot, but I need to ask you what happened. Where have you been all this time?" The detective's words hung in the air, filled with an unspoken concern. I don't know," Izuku stammered, his hands trembling slightly. "I woke up in a room. I had no idea where I was. It was too dark to see anything. I just saw the exit and I left." His voice trailed off, confusion still clouding his thoughts. Tsukachi raised an eyebrow, his expression confused as he leaned in closer. "Wait, you don't remember anything? From when you disappeared until now?" Izuku hesitated, struggling to piece the fragments together. "No, not really." "Wait, how long have I been gone?" His voice grew faint, as if he already knew the answer, but didn't want to hear it. The detective sighed, glancing at Inko for a moment before speaking. "Midoriya, you've been missing for 5 months. What?" The room fell into a stunned silence. Tsukachi exchanged a quick glance with the nurse, both of them watching Izuku's reaction with concern. The magnitude of what he was hearing seemed to hit him all at once. 5 months? I don't understand. How is that possible?" "Calm down, Midoriya," the detective said, trying to ease the tension in the room. "What's important is that you're here and you're safe. We need to focus on that right now." He paused before continuing, his voice softer but still firm. "Are you okay with answering a few more questions? It's important for us to understand what happened." Izuku blinked, still trying to process everything. His mind was a whirlwind of confusion, but the detective's calm demeanor, and the sight of his mother still sitting beside him, reassured him a little. He nodded slowly, though his voice was still shaky. I guess so. I don't remember much." The detective gave a small nod, taking a seat near the bed, his notebook ready. "That's okay, Midoriya. We just need to piece things together." "Do you remember what happened before you woke up?" the detective asked, leaning in slightly, his tone gentle but probing. Izuku's brow furrowed as he tried to dig into his fading memories. I think so," he stammered. "I was just going home. But the usual path I take it felt off. Like it stretched on forever, and no matter how much I walked, it just kept going. Like the end kept moving further away from me." The detective jotted the details down quickly, his eyes narrowing in thought as Izuku continued. And then, Izuku's voice grew quieter, as if the very memory of it made him uneasy. "There was this alleyway. I kept seeing it over and over. I'd walk past, and no matter which way I turned or how far I went, I'd always end up back at the same place, facing the same alley. It was like I was stuck, going in circles. No matter how much I tried to leave, it just kept coming back." The detective paused, a flicker of realization passing through his mind. "The alley, it sounds like the one I went into the other day. The looping, it has to be those holograms on the CCTV footage. Someone's been guiding him, isolating him." He cleared his throat and asked, "Anything else you remember, Midoriya?" Izuku's words faltered as he struggled to recall the details. "Why, yeah, after the 6th time I saw the alley, I don't know why, but I just walked in. And as I did," he trailed off, his face scrunching in concentration, the memory too blurry to grasp. "The path behind me, it was gone." Izuku's voice grew grim as the weight of the memory hit him again. "I panicked. I didn't know what to do. So I just ran. And ran. But the more I ran, the further the end of the alley seemed to get. Like it was pulling me deeper. And then it grabbed me," Izuku whispered, his voice shaky as the memory resurfaced. The detective leaned forward, his tone sharp with concern. "What grabbed you?" A hand," Izuku stammered, struggling to breathe as he recalled the coldness. "It was freezing, and there was no body attached. Just the hand." The detective's eyes widened at this. Wait, maybe that was what left the fingerprints, maybe that's why they came back inconclusive. Wait, there was something attached to it, the boy blurted out, his voice trembling. Tsukachi leaned in slightly, keeping his voice calm. What was attached to it, Midoriya? It was some kind of black tentacle. I didn't see where it came from, but Izuku swallowed hard, his eyes wide with panic. I just ran. I couldn't stop, I just kept running. His words began to tumble out faster, his breathing quickening as the heart monitor started beeping rapidly. Hey, take it easy, Tsukachi said, raising a hand gently. You're safe now. Don't push yourself too hard. That's enough for now. You need to rest. His tone was firm but soft, trying to calm the boy down. Tsukachi got up to leave just as the nurse walked over, her expression gentle. Alright, Izuku, we just need to run a few tests now, okay, she said softly, trying to keep her voice soothing. Oh okay, Izuku replied, nodding weakly. His voice was quiet, still shaky from the ordeal. The nurse gave Izuku a reassuring smile as she wheeled over a small cart with various medical supplies. Alright, let's start with the basics, she said, pulling out a BLD pressure cuff. She wrapped it around his arm and began to pump it, the soft whooshing sound filling the room. Just relax for me, okay? Izuku nodded, his arm stiff but compliant. After a few moments, she read the pressure and made a note on her clipboard. Good. Now, I'm going to check your temperature. She held up a thermometer, gently placing it under his tongue. Izuku sat quietly, his mind racing, but he forced himself to focus on the routine, steadying his breathing. When it beeped, she pulled it out and checked the reading. Looks fine. Next, she held up a small flashlight. I'm just going to check your eyes now. Follow the light, please. She waved the light back and forth in front of his eyes, watching as his pupils responded. Perfect. Finally, she took a stethoscope from around her neck and placed the cold metal against his chest. Deep breaths for me, okay. Izuku obeyed, taking slow, measured breaths, though his heart still raced. The nurse nodded, jotting down more notes. All done. You're doing great, Izuku. We'll let you rest after this. Oop, sorry, I forgot one last test, the nurse said with a light chuckle, reaching for a small RBB hammer on her desk. She motioned for Izuku to extend his arm. I just need to do a quick reflex test, okay? Oh okay, Izuku stammered, still a little tense as he held out his arm. The nurse gently held his wrist, positioning it so his palm faced upward. Just relax, she said softly. She tapped just below his wrist with the hammer, watching for a quick twitch in his fingers. They didn't respond. That's OD, the nurse began, but she was abruptly cut off as Izuku's hand shifted, transforming into a massive metal claw with a series of sharp, mechanical clicks. What the fu? Chapter 3, Horizon Rises, Ch3, Trial, the sides of a right-angled triangle are in a geometric progression. If the perimeter of the triangle is 36 centimeters, find the lengths of the sides. Answer x1 plus r squared, 36. He skimmed his paper one last time, trying to catch any mistakes. Seriously. Still an hour left, he thought, glancing at the clock in disbelief. Everything seemed to have come too easily this time, as if the answers were right there, just waiting to be written down. He looked over his answers again, almost suspicious. It wasn't just that the test felt easy, it was like his brain was working on autopilot, guiding him through every question without breaking a sweat. Why does this feel so effortless? He muttered under his breath, half expecting the examiner to announce it was all a trick. He pushed aside his suspicions, deciding to focus on submitting. Raising his hand, he caught the examiner's attention. Sir. I'm done, he said, his voice shaky with a hint of embarrassment. The examiner looked over, unimpressed. Midoriya, this isn't the time for jokes. You've only been at it for 40 minutes. No way you're done already, he replied, clearly bored. But sir, I really am done. Izuku stammered, his tone almost pleading, trying to convince the skeptical man. The examiner took Izuku's paper and studied it carefully. As he went through the answers, his eyes widened slightly, his skepticism melting away as he regained his composure. He looked at Izuku, this time with a hint of respect. I see, you really are done, Midoriya. My apologies for doubting you. Izuku flushed a little, feeling embarrassed but grateful for the acknowledgement. And no, it's no problem at all, sir. Honestly, I wouldn't believe it either if I were in your shoes, he replied, a nervous smile tugging at his lips. After confirming his SBMSN, the examiner told Izuku he was free to go. By the time Izuku was found, the school year had already come to an end. This meant he would have to take his final exam much later than the others, but he didn't mind. In fact, it gave him the time he needed to fully recover. Passing by the windows, he caught a glimpse of his reflection. He stopped and looked back, instinctively reaching up to touch the side of his face. It was odd. One of his most distinguishing features, the freckles that had dotted his cheeks, was gone. The doctors couldn't explain it fully, but they speculated that it had something to do with his quirk. Finally awakening. Was it a vague explanation? Yes. Did it make him feel any better? Also yes. Izuku shook off the thoughts that threatened to cloud his mind as he left the school grounds. I can't waste any more time. I've got a month until the entrance exam, he muttered under his breath, eyes fixed on the palm of his hand. I've got a quirk now, but I still need practice. He took a deep breath and, with a new resolve, set off toward his usual training spot. Ah! A loud scream echoed from a shirtless, green-haired boy standing triumphantly atop a ridiculously precarious spire of junk. This was Dagobah Beach, a place once known for its pristine shores and ideal vacation spots, but now a dump so depressing, even the seagulls had given up. Izuku, in all his wisdom, decided it would be the perfect training ground. Because what says, hero in the making, like dragging around broken refrigerators and rusty car parts, right? Sure, it wasn't glamorous, but he figured hauling trash would bulk him up, and at least the junk made for good target practice. Turns out, he wasn't wrong. 4 months of questionable life choices later, the beach was finally clean. Well, as clean as you can get when half your training involved beating up a microwave. Unfortunately, whatever rush of adrenaline had been fueling Izuku vanished as quickly as it came, leaving him to collapse off the spire like a puppet with its strings cut. He plummeted headfirst toward the ground, because of course he did. This was how his victory lap was going to end. Just as his face was about to meet the hard, unforgiving earth, he snapped awake and instinctively caught himself with a flutter of his wings. Yes, he had wings, it was a part of his quirk. The wing has a sleek, mechanical appearance, resembling a skeletal structure with blades instead of feathers. It features jointed sections at the elbow and wrist, with smaller, curved secondary blades near the base and long, sharp primary blades extending outward. That was way too close, Midoriya panted, still catching his breath. His heart was racing, but at least his head wasn't smashed into the sand. He pulled out his phone and checked the time. 6:58 a.m. Oh, good, I'm not late, he sighed in relief. I should probably get home before Mom starts to worry. Grabbing his discarded jacket and slinging his backpack over his shoulder, he broke into a sprint, heading for home with all the urgency of someone who definitely didn't want to explain why he was still shirtless. Today was the day. He was ready. Backpack. Check. Water bottle. Check. Breakfast. Already down. All he had to do now was get out the door. Mom. I'm heading out. Izuku called as he reached for the door handle, his nerves buzzing with anticipation. Just as he was about to step out, his mother's voice stopped him. Izuku, she said softly, walking up to him, before you go I just want you to know that I believe in you. Her smile was bright and warm, the kind that could push away any lingering doubt. Izuku felt his chest tighten with gratitude as he returned the smile. Thanks, Mom. That really means a lot. With that, he turned and headed out, feeling lighter than ever. As Izuku approached the golden gates of UA, he couldn't help but stop and stare in awe. The place was massive, almost comically so. This was at the place where he'd train, grow stronger, and finally pursue his lifelong dream of becoming the next top hero. Nothing could ruin this moment. Get the F out of my way, Deku. Izuku's entire body stiffened at the voice, the one that could turn even the best moments into a nightmare. Slowly, he turned to see none other than his childhood bully, Bakugo, storming past him with that usual scowl plastered on his face. Izuku hadn't seen the rabid bomber since everything had changed for him. Part of him worried how Bakugo would react now, after all this time. Good morning to you too, Kaken, Izuku stuttered, forcing the words out as the blonde stormed past him. Bakugo just scoffed, not even bothering to look back as he continued walking away. Izuku let out a long sigh of relief, but it was short-lived. His eyes widened in panic as he noticed his tail hovering dangerously close to the back of Bakugo's neck. He quickly yanked it back, silently praying Bakugo hadn't noticed. The last thing Izuku needed on his record was assaulting a fellow examinee or worse, accidentally melting one. He still couldn't forget the time a practice dummy had been reduced to a sizzling puddle of plastic after just a single sting from his tail. The tail itself was a long, sleek metal cable, ending in a sharp, harpoon-like tip. Attached to the side was a small canister of bioluminescent liquid, glowing faintly. That same liquid was the source of his worry, a substance that could melt through human flesh and bone as easily as it had that unfortunate dummy. He shuddered, quickly tucking the tail securely behind him. Yeah, let's not start the entrance exam with a murder charge, he muttered under his breath before heading inside. Izuku took a deep breath, shaking off the nerves and refocusing. He steeled his thoughts, reminding himself why he was here. This was the first step toward becoming the hero he'd always dreamed of. With renewed determination, he finally stepped through the gates, entering the school where his future would be built, brick by brick. There was no turning back now. Sinister giggle. The written portion was simple enough, actually, way simpler than he had expected. It was just like when he took his final exams, the answers practically wrote themselves. It was almost as if the universe was trying to make up for all the other times it had thrown curveballs his way. He finished the test without breaking a sweat and handed in his papers. Then came the auditorium. He walked in and scanned for his assigned seat, only to freeze when his eyes landed on the one right next to, of course, Bakugo. The universe, apparently, had decided it was necessary for him to sit next to the one person who could make this entire experience exponentially more stressful. Hooray, Izuku thought, forcing a smile as he sat down, hoping Bakugo would ignore him for the next few hours. But knowing his luck, that was probably asking too much. Izuku settled into his seat, feeling the weight of the awkward silence settle between him and Bakugo. He could practically feel the occasional glances the blonde was shooting his way, but he couldn't quite figure out why. Were they just normal glances, or was Bakugo planning something, like always? Before he could give it more thought, the silence was shattered by an obnoxiously loud voice that practically rattled the walls of the auditorium. Hello, little listeners. Welcome to the practical portion of the entrance exam. I'm your host, Precinct My CC. Izuku winced at the volume, his hands instinctively pressing against his ears as the booming voice of Present Mike echoed through the room. He shot a quick glance at Bakugo, who, unsurprisingly, seemed completely unbothered by the noise. However, whatever annoyance Izuku had melted away in an instant as realization hit him like a freight train. That was the pro-hero Present Mike. No way. That's Present Mike. I listen to his radio shows all the time, he gushed, unable to contain his excitement. Without even realizing it, his concealed tail began wagging around like an excited puppy, swishing back and forth with enthusiasm, completely oblivious to the situation. Meanwhile, Bakugo, sitting next to him, narrowed his eyes. He hadn't noticed the tail earlier, but now that it was moving, he couldn't ignore it. And the liquid in the canister. That weird glowing stuff. It looked like something straight out of a sci-fi horror movie. What the F, Bakugo thought, both surprised and mildly alarmed. Now, let's cut to the chase. You guys will be facing our battle robots in the practical exam. Totally cool, right? Present Mic's voice boomed across the room. Come on, can I get a yeah? The auditorium responded with a loud silence. Tough crowd, huh? I respect that, Present Mic said, completely unbothered by the lack of enthusiasm. Without missing a beat, he continued, all right. We've got 3 types of robots for you today. He gestured to the screen behind him, which displayed images of the robots along with their respective point values of 1, 2, and 3. You get the gist. Just smash them up and rack up as many points as you can. He paused for a moment, letting the info sink in before adding, any questions? His voice still booming, but now giving the examinees a chance to speak up. A tall, blue-haired boy with glasses stood up sharply and raised his hand. Present Mic immediately pointed him out. Yes, examinee, sir, the boy began, his voice stern and commanding. The pamphlet clearly states there are 4 types of robots, yet you've only mentioned 3. If this is an oversight on you, A.'s part, I must express my disappointment. Such an error is unacceptable from a prestigious school like you, A. It's unbecoming of the standards we were led to expect. The boy's stern gaze shifted toward Izuku. And you there. With the glowing tail, please control your quirk. It's distracting and potentially dangerous in a setting like this. Not to mention your incessant mumbling. Normally, Izuku would shrink back at being called out like that, but something about the blue-haired boy's attitude rubbed him the wrong way. Before he could stop himself, the words spilled out. You're the only one distracting people, you know. Bakugo raised an eyebrow at that, clearly surprised, while the blue-haired boy's expression shifted from indignant to offended. Excuse me, he snapped, his voice tight. Izuku took a breath, trying to keep his tone steady. WL, Present Mic didn't mention the last robot because it doesn't have any points, he explained, more confidently now. It's a trap, an obstacle to avoid. That's why he skipped over it. The blue-haired boy blinked, thrown off by the sudden explanation, while the room grew a little quieter as the words sank in. Slightly embarrassed, the blue-haired boy sat down, pushing his glasses up as if they might help him recover some dignity. Present Mic, ever the professional, picked right up without missing a beat. Thank you, examinee, you are indeed correct. Mike boomed, seemingly delighted that someone else had done half the explaining for him. The 0-pointer is more of an obstacle than anything else, so it's best to just avoid it. Anyway, that's all I've got for you. File out to your designated exam areas and remember, go plus ultra. Can I get a yeah? The auditorium was again silent. Izuku couldn't help but think that, with the amount of screaming this guy did, the real obstacle today was everyone's eardrums surviving the exam. When Izuku reached the exam area, he couldn't help but stare in disbelief for a moment, his brain trying to process the sheer scale of it. A mock city. For an exam. How the hell could you afford something like this? Briefly, he wondered if tuition fees involved selling a kidney. But he quickly snapped himself out of it, shaking his head. Now wasn't the time to get distracted. He began stretching, rolling his shoulders and loosening up. This was it. The moment that would decide his future. He couldn't afford to mess up here, not now. It was too important. One wrong move, and everything he'd worked for could come crashing down like a city hit by a nuke. Izuku was dressed in a simple white t-shirt and black shorts, giving him the freedom of movement he needed. As he mentally prepped himself, he muttered, "All right, this is it. Don't mess it up." His attention shifted toward the gate ahead, where he spotted a girl who looked incredibly nervous, actually, very nervous. Ever the good-hearted person, Izuku instinctively started toward her, thinking maybe a few reassuring words could help calm her down. But before he got too far, a firm hand clamped down on his shoulder. "Excuse me, that girl is obviously trying to concentrate." "Are you trying to disrupt her?" the all-too-familiar voice said. "Oh great, this guy again," Izuku grimaced internally as he turned to see the blue-haired boy from earlier. "What? No, of course N.G.O." Present Mick's voice boomed from the speakers near the gates, leaving a bunch of the examinees momentarily confused. "What are you standing around for? There's no countdown in a real battle." "Go, go, go," he confirmed, sending the examinees into a scramble as they rushed toward the gate. Momentarily distracted by the chaos, the blue-haired boy turned his attention back to the green-haired delinquent he had just reprimanded. He blinked in shock as Izuku suddenly sprouted a pair of mechanical wings from his back, the wings spreading wide with a metallic whir. "What on earth," he thought, stepping back instinctively, lest he get knocked down by the sudden transformation. Izuku, fully focused now, didn't even notice. He kicked off the ground with a determined look in his eyes, the wings propelling him forward, leaving the stunned boy and the rest of the competition behind. As Izuku soared through the air, he quickly spotted a pair of one-pointers moving through the mock city. "Perfect," he muttered under his breath. Without hesitation, he angled his wings and dive-bombed toward them, claws out and ready, the mechanical joints of his wings whirring as they adjusted for maximum speed. With a sharp, focused glare, he descended like a missile, aiming to tear into the robots with precision, already calculating the impact in his mind. This was his chance to show what he was made of. Izuku landed with a resounding crash, his claws tearing into the first one-pointer with brutal efficiency. The robot crumpled beneath him, its mechanical limbs locking up as it was crushed almost instantly. Before he could even celebrate the quick takedown, the second robot lunged at him, its arm swinging toward his head. Izuku narrowly dodged the jab, his wings flicking out to give him an extra burst of agility. In a swift, fluid motion, he countered, slashing with his claws across the robot's arm. The sharp tips of his claws sliced clean through the metal, severing a large portion of its arm in a single strike. The robot staggered back, now severely limited in its ability to fight. Izuku smirked, cracking his knuckles as he prepared to finish the job. Izuku retracted his wings with a swift motion, dashing toward the staggered robot. The robot, desperate to defend itself, swung its remaining arm at him in a last-ditch effort. Izuku smoothly dodged, using the extended arm as a springboard to launch himself into the air. With his claws extended, he aimed directly for the robot's head and, with a savage swipe, tore it clean off. The robot's body crumpled to the ground, now effectively out of commission. Izuku landed gracefully, a grin spreading across his face as he looked at the now headless machine. Without missing a beat, he crushed its head in his claws with a casual crunch, obliterating it into a heap of mangled scrap. "That's two," he muttered, eyes scanning the area for his next target. "And not a single scratch on me." He wiped his hands off on his shorts, already hunting for more robots to take down. Izuku's eyes locked onto his target's 2 two-pointers and 4 one-pointers. "Bingo," he thought, a smirk tugging at his lips. He immediately shifted his clawed hand, the metal twisting and shifting as it morphed into a half-formed assault rifle, the barrel gleaming menacingly. He didn't hesitate. The first shot rang out with a deafening crack, the force of it sending a jolt through his arm. But as the rounds left the barrel, they weren't typical bullets. Instead, metal marbles heavier, denser fired with blistering speed, tearing through the air like a storm of miniature wrecking ball. The first shot collided with a one-pointer's chest, the impact creating a deep dent and sending it stumbling back. The next few shots hit its optics, shattering them in a burst of sparks, rendering it blind. Without pausing, Izuku shifted his aim, peppering another one-pointer with a few quick rounds that tore through its limbs and torso. He was already in motion as he fired. His wings flared out, propelling him forward in a blur of speed. In an instant, he was on the first two-pointer, closing the gap. His clawed hand slashed downward, hitting the robot's head with such precision and force that it crumpled under the attack like a tin can, its metal frame groaning before collapsing into a heap. The sound of more shots echoed through the air as he fired off a few more rounds, shredding the remaining one-pointers. Izuku instinctively ducked under the two-pointer's sudden tail strike, feeling the air WHP above his head. Without missing a beat, he lashed out with his own tail, the harpoon-like stinger shooting forward and embedding itself deep into the robot's head. The robot stuttered, its body twitching violently as the bioluminescent liquid pumped through the stinger and into its system. Within seconds, the head began to melt, the metal warping and sizzling as it softened into a glowing, molten pool. The two-pointer staggered backward, jerking awkwardly before finally collapsing with a loud crash, its head a bubbling mass of liquefied metal. Breathing heavily but undeterred, Izuku landed lightly, his eyes scanning for his next targets. "Too easy," he muttered with a grin. Izuku's eyes caught sight of another examinee, a blonde-haired boy who obliterated a robot with a bright beam of light from his stomach. The victory was short-lived, though, as the boy immediately doubled over, clutching his stomach in obvious discomfort. "He's wide open," Izuku muttered, spotting a three-pointer a short distance away, its missile launcher primed and ready to fire at the unsuspecting teen. Izuku shifted his gun hand into something new, a sleek rocket launcher with a wide barrel, black and metallic body, glowing with yellow accents. He took aim and fired. The missile shot out with a sharp hiss, striking the three-pointer dead on. A fiery explosion erupted, reducing the robot to a smoking heap of twisted metal, its remains burning in the aftermath. The blonde boy quickly took notice of what just happened and flashed Izuku a dazzling smile. "Merci beaucoup, mon ami. I really let my guard down back there, non." He winked, still clutching his stomach as he tried to compose himself. Izuku blinked in confusion at the blonde boy's words but decided he couldn't waste time. Yeah," he replied hastily before sprouting his wings again and taking off to find more robots. His mind raced as he scanned the area. "I'm at 13 points now, and it's only been 3 minutes. That's good, but I need to do better if I want to make it in." "Quite an interesting batch this year," a woman with raven black hair remarked, her sharp eyes scanning the screens showing the various examinees. "They all show promise," replied a man with a body resembling a block of cement, his voice gruff. "But, as always, not all of them can make it in. Only the best will rise to the challenge." He crossed his arms, watching intently as the students fought through the robots, assessing their every move. "That blonde kid with the explosions, he's got the highest villain points so far. He's strong, but that attitude of his is concerning," a white-haired man in a red spandex costume remarked as he observed a familiar explosive Pomeranian, Bakugo, steal another examinee's points and then scream at them to "F off, problem children, every last one of them," another man muttered, his voice deadpan and dripping with sarcasm. His long black hair hung messily, framing eyes so sleep-deprived he could probably outlast an office worker in a coffee-fueled all-nighter. He sighed deeply, watching the exam unfold. "At this rate, I'll be lucky if they don't put me in detention." Toshinori, in his frail, emaciated form, let out a weak chuckle as he scanned the screens. The explosive blonde was making quite the impression, but something else caught his eye. He squinted at another screen and immediately recognized a green-haired boy, his arms replaced with razor-sharp blades, slicing through robots like they were birthday cakes. "Why does this kid seem so familiar? Can I be a hero without a quirk? Wait, it's him. But didn't he say he was quirkless? What's going on here?" Toshinori thought, his mind racing with confusion. He quickly turned toward his academic superior. "Nizu, mind pulling up that kid's file? I need to check something," he asked, his tone tense but controlled. The one he addressed, a small creature resembling a mix between a mouse and a bear, tilted his head with a curious smile. "Oh. Someone's caught your attention already, Toshinori." Nizu replied, pulling up the examinee files and scanning through until he found the one Toshinori requested. "Let's see. Izuku Midoriya, age 14, quirk, absolute arsenal, Aldera Junior High, an excellent student. Nizu's eyes narrowed slightly as he paused. Oh my, this is rather unexpected. He adjusted his posture, tapping the file thoughtfully. It seems he went missing for some time. Very curious indeed. Perhaps there's more to this story than meets the eye. Toshinori. Missing. When? How? Toshinori's voice wavered, shock tightening his chest. The 23rd of July, 2153, Nizu responded calmly, glancing over the file. Toshinori's heart sank, the date hitting him harder than he expected. That's the same day. His mind raced, dredging up memories of that hopeless search. The day I couldn't find him, the day I crushed his dreams unjustly. His hands clenched into fists. Some hero I am, he thought bitterly. I couldn't even help a single boy. He forced his gaze back to the screen, eyes locking onto the image of Midoriya, smirking with oil-drenched claws. His heart twisted. Just what happened to you in all that time, kid? I'll look into Midoriya's situation later, Nizu said with a mischievous glint in his eyes. But for now I think our examinees are getting a bit too comfortable. With that, he pressed the big red button on the dashboard, the corners of his mouth twitching in amusement. Izuku darted forward with explosive speed, narrowly dodging the foe missiles from the three-pointer as they exploded behind him in a cloud of dust and shrapnel. The massive robot swiped at him with its hulking arm, but before it could connect, Izuku slid beneath it, slashing upward with a fluid motion. His arm, now a gleaming blade, cut through the metal like paper, severing the bot's limb in a shower of sparks. He didn't hesitate. Momentum carried him forward as his arm shifted into a gun mid-stride. With a swift motion, he aimed at the towering machine's head, unleashing a rapid volley of metal marbles. The projectiles hammered into the robot, each impact cratering its armor with an echoing clang. The final shot hit square in the processor, and the bot staggered backward, smoke billowing from its head, its system short-circuiting. With one final groan of metal, the three-pointer collapsed, sparks flying from its limp form. Izuku leaned on his blade arm, using it as a makeshift crutch, while wiping sweat from his forehead with his free hand. That's 67, phew, he muttered, his breath coming in shallow bursts. His body was feeling the strain, but the determined glint in his eyes hadn't faded. I think I've got about 5 minutes left. 67 should be enough to pass, but I need more. He scanned the area, ready to push himself further despite the fatigue setting in. Izuku froze mid-search as the ground beneath him trembled violently, a deep rumble echoing through the area. His heart raced. What? An earthquake, he muttered, glancing around frantically. But it wasn't the earth itself. It was something much worse. The panicked screams of other examinees reached his ears as they fled past him. Following their line of sight, he turned and his breath caught in his throat. A towering green monstrosity of machinery lumbered into view. Its colossal frame cast a shadow that swallowed entire sections of the testing grounds. The zero-pointer. Or, as some of the older students ominously referred to it, executioner. That's the zero-pointer. It's huge. How does you even afford this thing? Izuku thought, wings unfurling as he prepared to join the crowd of fleeing examinees. But then, help. His head snapped back, spotting a brown-haired girl pinned under rubble. It was the same girl he'd noticed before the exam began. Of course, he thought bitterly. Everyone runs away, and I get to be the moron who runs towards certain death. Great plan, Izuku. He hesitated, glancing back at the executioner of a robot stomping closer. The zero-pointer's glowing red eyes seemed to mock him, as if saying, yeah, kid, run. I'll wait. Izuku groaned, slapping his forehead. Why do I do this to myself? Without another word, he dove toward the trapped girl. Somebody, please help me, she cried out, panic overtaking her as the ground quaked beneath the advancing zero-pointer. Her ankle was pinned beneath rubble from the building the massive robot had crushed moments earlier. Any attempt to move only worsened the pain from her likely broken ankle. She couldn't free herself, couldn't run, couldn't fight back. All she could do was close her eyes and pray that someone, anyone, would help her. Her prayers were answered. A green-haired boy descended from above, his mechanical wings flaring dramatically as he landed next to her. His clawed, metallic hand began ripping chunks of debris away like paper. His voice, steady despite the chaos, cut through her panic. "Are you alright?" She blinked up at him in shock. "Does it look like I'm alright?" was on the tip of her tongue, but she bit it back, suddenly aware that her rescuer looked about as exhausted as she felt. "Why yeah, but my ankle is broken, I can't walk," she stammered, panic still evident in her voice. The boy's gaze flicked to the 0-pointer, its massive frame closing the distance with unsettling speed, then back to her. He tightened his jaw, determination flashing in his eyes. "Hold on. Tight," he said firmly, crouching down. Without hesitation, he hoisted her onto his back, careful to avoid jostling her injured ankle. Then, with a single, powerful flap of his metallic wings, they shot into the air, the force leaving cracks in the ground below. They soared high, narrowly escaping as the 0-pointer's massive foot crashed down, obliterating the spot where they had stood moments earlier. Uraraka was no stranger to floating through the air, but this was different, thrilling and terrifying all at once. As Midoriya soared, the wind whipped her hair wildly, making her feel like she was truly flying. But her awe was interrupted as Midoriya's focus shifted. His sharp eyes locked onto the colossal robot below, its massive arm leaving a trail of destruction. If it broke her ankle just by being near, what's happening to everyone else, he thought grimly. His grip on his resolve tightened. "I have to stop that thing." Midoriya spotted a familiar figure sprinting at blinding speed, the blue-haired boy who had earlier tried, and failed, to lecture him. Adjusting his trajectory, he dived sharply, aligning himself beside the runner. "Ha! You again," the boy snapped, his irritation cutting through the chaos. Midoriya ignored the attitude, slowing his flight to match pace with the boy. "Take her," he commanded, carefully transferring Uraraka to the boy's arms. Wait, what are you?" the blue-haired boy began, but Midoriya cut him off with a firm tone. "I'm taking that thing down. You run." Without another word, Midoriya flared his wings and took off toward the looming executioner. As Midoriya soared toward the giant robot, his arm morphed into a rocket launcher with a mechanical hiss. Without hesitation, he fired a missile straight at the executioner's head. The explosion rang out like a thunderclap, leaving a scorched mark on the massive machine but ultimately achieving little more than mildly annoying it. The robot's glowing red eyes swiveled to meet his, and its enormous body shifted with deliberate menace to face him fully. "Great," Midoriya muttered as the executioner began to move, its metal joints groaning under its sheer weight. "I just set off a skyscraper on legs. Fantastic." The robot raised its arm to swat him from the sky like a fly, and Midoriya couldn't help but grin bitterly to himself. Well, at least he won't have to worry about student loans if he gets turned into roadkill. He dodged the swipe, adrenaline spiking as the behemoth's arm narrowly missed. Seriously, who designed this thing? And why do they hate children? Midoriya fired off another missile, praying it would at least scratch the paint job. The missile once again barely dented the executioner's towering frame, a fact it seemed to mock as it swung another massive punch toward the hovering Midoriya. He narrowly evaded, the air pressure alone making him reel, and watched helplessly as the fist obliterated the building behind him, turning concrete and steel into a fine dust cloud. "Fantastic," he muttered dryly, his eyes darting between the robot and the rubble. Nothing like a giant death machine to remind you how fragile property values are. Hovering just out of the robot's range, he flexed his arm, and the rocket launcher began to shift again, gears whirring and plates snapping into new positions. "All right, if one missile won't do it," he said to himself, watching the barrel expand into something far more ominous, the launcher itself now taking up to his forearm. "I guess I'll just have to bring the bigger boom." The executioner's glowing eyes locked on him, its joints creaking as it raised both arms. Midoriya smirked, his face glistening with sweat as he locked onto the target. A sleek, built-in sight slid out from his launcher, the kind of gadget that screamed, "I was designed to take down something bigger than your average household pest." He steadied his aim and fired. The missile that burst forth didn't just look advanced, it looked like it had a doctorate in destruction. It tore through the air, almost as if it knew it was on a mission to prove superiority over every other piece of hardware in the vicinity. When it struck the robot's raised arms, the resulting explosion wasn't so much a blast as it was an insult to physics itself. The executioner staggered back, sparks and smoke pouring from the now mangled arms. For a moment, it looked almost indignant, if a giant, soulless murder machine could express indignation. Midoriya hovered in place, watching the chaos unfold. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he wondered if U.A.'s insurance policy covered overachieving examinees with apocalyptic tendencies. He fired another round of missiles, unleashing a barrage that made the helpless executioner resemble a piñata at a party hosted by an arms dealer. The robot, clearly out of options, could only feebly lift the remnants of its arms in a futile attempt to block. It didn't help Midoriya's precision ensured that each shot found its mark. The first missile hit dead center in the robot's chest, tearing through what remained of its armor and detonating inside. The resulting explosion sent mechanical components flying in every direction like confetti, ensuring the executioner would never celebrate its one-year warranty. The second missile found its target on the robot's back, hitting a critical mechanism and causing the massive machine to hunch forward as if bowing to its inevitable defeat. The third missile was the piece de resistance, striking the executioner square in the head. The explosion seriously damaged said head, which was now flaming, as well as the rest of its body where the missiles had struck. Izuku recalled his launcher, its parts folding back seamlessly into his arm as though it had never been there, and took off towards the fallen robot's head. His wings shifted, the sharp metallic feathers rearranging themselves with mechanical precision, locking together to form a sleek, seed-shaped shell. With gravity and momentum on his side, he dove toward the damaged head at breakneck speed. The pointed tip of his makeshift shell hit the robot's already cracked skull, piercing through with an ear-splitting crunch. The force carried him cleanly through, fragments of metal scattering in his wake like shrapnel from an overstuffed vending machine. He emerged on the other side in a glorious burst of light and debris, the lifeless head collapsing in on itself. Izuku continued his descent, the shell grinding against the sidewalk as he slowed, carving a jagged trench into the pavement. That would surely get him an angry letter from U.A.'s maintenance team. With a calculated flick, the wings unfurled in one fluid motion, the feathers shimmering in the sunlight as he flipped upright with practiced grace. Izuku touched down with a soft rustle of his wings, eyes scanning the damage left by the zero-pointer. The ground around him was littered with debris, the colossal machine now a crumpled heap after its system failed. He winced as the explosion rang out, a shockwave forcing him to instinctively shield himself with his right wing, the impact rattling him but not doing much harm. The bigger they are, the harder they fall, but that was just ridiculous, he muttered, catching his breath. A loud horn sounded, followed by Present Mic's enthusiastic voice echoing through the stadium. "ANDD, that's a wrap, the exam is over." Izuku slumped in exhaustion, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Ah man, I wasted all my time on that stupid robot," he muttered, oblivious to the astonished looks of his fellow examinees, who were still processing the unbelievable sight they had just witnessed. "If you have any injuries, please approach Recovery Girl to get them fixed up. After you do, please exit the premises. Good luck, little listeners." Present Mic continued, the announcement booming across the grounds. Izuku remained focused on his own thoughts, unaware that his chaotic, heroic actions had left quite the impression. The other examinees, still staring at him in awe, slowly began making their way toward Recovery Girl, all while exchanging stunned glances at the green-haired boy who had just single-handedly obliterated the zero-pointer. "Did you see that guy? That was crazy. Man, if that's the competition, I don't think I'm passing," one of the examinees murmured, still wide-eyed from the spectacle. "I know, right? He was like a one-man army with those weapons," his friend replied, shaking his head in disbelief. Izuku was snapped from his thoughts when a small, elderly woman in unique medical attire approached him. "Alright, do you have any injuries, Sonny?" Recovery Girl asked with a kind smile. Izuku fought every urge to fangirl, trying to remain composed. "No, my quirk lets me heal. I'm just a bit tired," he replied, forcing down his excitement. "Well, that's nice, dear," Recovery Girl said, reaching into her coat and pulling out a gummy bear. "Here, have one of these. It'll replenish your energy." Izuku took the candy with gratitude and quickly popped it into his mouth, feeling a burst of energy. As he walked away from the mock city, he couldn't help but think of the girl he had helped earlier. "I hope she got medical attention," he thought, his mind lingering on the girl trapped under the rubble. Tsukachi was tired, exhausted, in fact. The boy had been found alive, well, and somehow with a quirk he didn't have before. That alone was enough to send alarms ringing in Tsukachi's mind. How did a boy who had vanished for 5 months return so suddenly, appearing almost completely malnourished, only to make a miraculous recovery? And how did he go from quirkless to possessing one of the most powerful ones he'd seen? There was something deeply wrong about the situation, something Tsukachi couldn't shake. Then there was the matter of the strange mural, its cryptic meaning gnawing at him. But the results came back inconclusive, just like everything else. Nothing about the situation made any sense. His colleagues urged him to drop it, to move on, but Tsukachi couldn't let it go. Every unanswered question, every missing piece, was pushing him to dig deeper. Tsukachi sat back in his chair, his mind running through the events again. His eyes scanned the clutter of papers and files across his desk, but his thoughts were focused elsewhere. The strangest part of this investigation, the part that gnawed at him relentlessly, was the interaction with Izuku Midoriya. Every time he asked Midoriya simple, direct questions, his quirk, the one designed to detect lies, picked up 2 different answers from 2 different people. 2 conflicting truths, both seeming to come from the same boy. One answer was telling the truth, and the other was lying. But Midoriya was the only person there. The implications of that, the impossibility of it, unsettled him deeply. It wasn't a simple case of a liar or a confused person. It was as if there were 2 distinct identities, 2 separate voices within the same body, each providing a piece of the puzzle but hiding the rest. There were 2 theories. Midoriya was hiding something. Or something was hiding inside of Midoriya. Chapter 4, Horizon Rises, Ch4, Challenge, Star Izuku. Inko, Midoriya asked, her voice laced with concern as she noticed her son locked in a fierce staring contest with the fish on his plate. Huh. Izuku snapped out of his trance, realizing what he was doing. "Oh, sorry, Mom, I was just thinking about the entrance exam. I don't know why it's taking so long for the letter to arrive," he muttered, eyes dropping back to the plate. "What if I didn't make it in at all?" Inko gave him a soft smile. "Izuku, you've worked so hard. You're a hero to me, no matter what the letter says." Izuku gave a small, uncertain smile. "Thanks, Mom," he mumbled, then glanced back at the fish. "Guess I'll you before you start judging me too. Meanwhile at you." Absolute arsenal, Nizu's voice, unmistakably bright yet sharp, echoed in his office as he read through a particular green-haired teen's file. "Allows the creation of weapons via nanometallic cells that his body naturally produces." Quite simple in theory, his voice trailed off as he shifted his focus to the monitor in front of him, where footage played Izuku Midoriya stabbing a 2-pointer with that strange stinger of his, causing the glowing liquid inside to melt the robot's head into a molten goo within seconds. "But this acid," Nizu muttered, an unsettling realization creeping over him. He turned to the desk beside him, where a test tube rested containing a sample of the acid. It was the same substance seen in the video, dripping from the weapon. He analyzed it further. Tests confirmed the acid was made from the exact same nanometallic cells that Midoriya's body produces. But then, there was something else, something far more disconcerting. The acid appeared to move on its own, almost like it had a will of its own. Nizu adjusted his reading glasses thoughtfully. It doesn't make any sense. A self-propelling acid, birthed from a boy's own cells. What else is he capable of? He steepled. His pause in contemplation, realizing this new development raised more questions than answers. There was also the matter of Izuku's ranged weapons, particularly his guns and rocket launcher. Nizu furrowed his brow, reviewing the footage again. Guns typically rely on the combustion of oxygen to propel bullets at high speeds, but Midoriya's seem to operate on a similar principle yet, unlike traditional firearms, the magazines never seem to run out of ammunition. Nizu found himself wondering if the magazines even served a true purpose or if they were merely a visual component. Given that Midoriya's weapons functioned as extensions of his body, it was possible that his quirk provided a constant supply of ammunition. Is it simply a part of his internal mechanism? Or is there something far more complex at play here? Nizu mused, tapping his claws thoughtfully. This new layer of Midoriya's abilities was both fascinating and troubling. Each weapon seemed to blend seamlessly into his body's own systems, blurring the line between organic and artificial. What was truly going on inside him, and what hidden capabilities lay beneath the surface? Nizu's mind raced with possibilities, unsure of just how deep the mystery ran. When it comes to Midoriya's rocket launchers, the questions only multiply. Where, exactly, does his body source the components necessary to create a highly advanced, military-grade ballistic missile in mere seconds? Building such weapons requires materials like high-grade metals, precision-crafted alloys, and complex propellant substances that are beyond the scope of most human capabilities, especially if they are being produced within the body. To break it down scientifically, missiles typically require alloys such as titanium, tungsten, or various steel alloys for the casing and structural components, materials that can withstand extreme pressure and heat. Additionally, missiles rely on sophisticated propellants, like liquid or solid rocket fuels, and guidance systems, which are complex mechanical and electronic components. Now, imagine Midoriya producing these materials from within his own body. Not only does it seem impossible for his body to generate the raw materials required such as high-density metals, complex chemicals, and sensitive electronics, but there's also the issue of the sheer toxicity of many of these substances. For instance, chemicals used in rocket propellants and explosives, like hydrazine, are incredibly dangerous to the human body. They can cause immediate damage to internal organs, respiratory failure, and long-term poisoning if exposed to them in large amounts. Yet, Midoriya appears unaffected. His body's resistance to these substances, particularly to their toxic effects, raises even more questions. Could his nanometallic cells possess some kind of natural filtration system, allowing him to process and eliminate these harmful chemicals? Or is his biology fundamentally altered in ways that make him immune to these dangers, allowing him to safely create these materials inside his own body? It's an enigma that only deepens the mystery of Midoriya's quirk, suggesting that the boundaries of his abilities stretch far beyond the ordinary. And then there are the wings. Oh, Lord have mercy, those wings. From a purely scientific standpoint, Midoriya's wings should be impossible. If they're made from the same dense nanometallic cells as the rest of his weaponry, the laws of physics suggest he should be grounded. Those wings, resembling a cluster of blades more than feathers, are far too heavy for flight. Wings of this density should never be able to generate the necessary lift to carry his body. And yet, somehow, Midoriya takes to the skies with ease, defying everything known about aerodynamics. Even stranger. Midoriya's wings don't even need to flap once he's airborne. When in the air, they remain eerily still, held in place as if they're no longer serving any function. How is this possible? The sheer force needed to stay in flight without any visible propulsion mechanism should be beyond comprehension. It's as though something is secretly driving him through the air, but no matter how many times Nizu examines the data, he can't identify the source. Could there be a hidden propulsion mechanism inside Midoriya's body, one that isn't immediately visible? Perhaps some kind of nano-assisted thrusters or gravitational manipulation built into his wings or body itself. Despite Nizu's intelligence and advanced understanding of quirks, this enigma has him stumped. How could Midoriya generate enough move to remain airborne with a wing structure that, on paper, should be incapable of flight? The possibilities seem endless, and yet they all spiral into more questions without clear answers. And then there's his regeneration. A minor detail in the grand scheme of things, but still his healing ability is alarming. The records show that Midoriya can repair damage to his body at an astonishing rate, a broken arm fixed in less than 3 seconds. Regeneration isn't exactly an anomaly in the world of quirks, but this level of rapid recovery. It's unheard of. And the fact that it's so consistent makes it even more terrifying. But here's where things start to get even more bizarre. His regeneration seems to function alongside his nanometallic cells, which raises the uncomfortable possibility that his entire healing process might just involve turning damaged tissue into some form of metal, before converting it back to flesh at an inhuman speed. The theory that nanocells could be repurposed for tissue regeneration makes some sense, but the sheer efficiency of it. That doesn't. It's almost as if he's using his nanometallic body to repair itself faster than anything should be physically possible. Which brings us back to the fundamental question, how much one quirk can do. So far, he's got claws, swords, guns, missiles, flight, and now regeneration, and it all stems from the same source. It's too much. No one should be able to wield all these abilities at once, but Midoriya does so effortlessly, almost as if it's second nature to him. Not to mention, doctors have started to suspect that Midoriya might be able to custom-make his own weapons. This suggests that, in theory, he could invent an entirely new weapon from scratch, drawing only from his imagination. Imagine that, creating a completely unique weapon based on nothing but his mental design and his quirk's ability to manifest it through nanometallic cells. This would not just be about replicating existing items but creating something entirely new each time. Every time Nizu goes over Midoriya's file, it only gets more overwhelming. Regeneration, like the other abilities, could be explained in isolation, but when combined with the rest of his powers, it forms a terrifyingly complete package. Midoriya's quirk is an enigma wrapped in impossibilities, and the more Nizu thinks about it, the more he begins to wonder, how much of this is truly his own power, and how much is something else entirely. And for the real sugar on the cream, Izuku's quirk awakened just 5 months ago, the same amount of time he was missing. Before that, he was pronounced kidnapped, only to reappear malnourished and seemingly broken. Then, within those 5 months, he not only awakened his quirk but mastered it to an unsettling degree. As if that weren't enough, his physical growth bordered on supernatural. According to doctors, his training yielded 78% more gains than a normal person could expect, transforming him from a frail, malnourished boy into a lean, muscular teen of average height. In just 5 months, he closed the gap between years of development. The timeline alone was impossible to ignore: kidnapped, returned, awakened, and then becoming a one-man army in the span of a single school semester. If this was progress, what would he look like in a year? And if the situation wasn't baffling enough, it got even more surreal when the entrance exam results came in. Izuku not only dominated the practical portion with his combat prowess, but he also achieved a 96% on the written exam, just shy of the top score of 98% by Momo Yaoyorozu. This wasn't just a kid with a shiny new quirk. This was someone who, within 5 months, went from a quirkless nobody to a physical powerhouse with tactical brilliance and academic excellence to match. At this rate, Nizu couldn't help but think, what's next? Is he going to rewrite physics, too? Nizu leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the monitor replaying Izuku's exam performance. Everything about this boy screamed anomaly, from the impossibly advanced quirk to his meteoric rise in physical and intellectual prowess. He tapped his paws against the desk, deep in thought. Izuku Midoriya wasn't just a student, he was a walking puzzle, and Nizu loved puzzles. If his suspicions were correct, this quirk wasn't just crafting weapons, it was something far beyond that. Something revolutionary. The acceptance letter should have reached his residence by now, Nizu mused, a smile that the teachers all feared tugging at his lips. Izuku Midoriya, you are quite the case, aren't you? I simply must see how far your potential can go. Izuku stared at his screen. Izuku stared at his computer screen, brows furrowing in deep concentration. There was something about the faint glitches flickering across it so subtle they could have been figments of his imagination. Still, his curiosity gnawed at him. Just as his hand reached toward the screen, compelled by some strange instinct. Izuku. His mother's frantic voice shattered his focus, followed by the sound of hurried footsteps echoing down the hall. Inko burst into his room, panting and wide-eyed, clutching a pristine envelope emblazoned with U.A.'s unmistakable insignia. "It came," she exclaimed, holding it out with trembling hands. After a minor heart attack and an adrenaline rush from his mother's unexpected enthusiasm, Izuku finally managed to calm both of them down. Now, the envelope rested on his desk, its U.A. insignia gleaming in the light, almost taunting him with its weight of possibility. Taking a deep breath, Izuku steadied his trembling hands. Here goes nothing, he thought, tearing open the envelope. A small disc slipped out, clattering onto his desk. He blinked in confusion, watching as it lit up and began projecting a hologram. "Wait a second, All Might." Izuku yelped, his voice cracking. "Ha ha ha ha, yes, young man, I am here." As a holographic recording. All Might's booming voice echoed through the room from the glowing disc. "And I am here to tell you your test results." Izuku, caught between sheer awe and existential dread, snapped his attention to the recording. This was it. The moment that decided his fate, hero or soul-crushed convenience store cashier. First, your written exam score a very impressive 96%. Second place overall. Enough to secure you a spot in the general course. But you're here to become a hero. All Might leaned in dramatically, or as much as a hologram could, sending Izuku into a silent internal scream. "So, let's see how your practical performance stacks up." A screen beside All Might lit up, displaying Izuku's scores. "Through your relentless determination and incredible combat prowess, you scored an impressive 67 villain points. A truly outstanding result, young Midoriya. This alone secures your place in the hero course." Izuku's heart soared, his eyes shimmering with a mix of joy and disbelief. He had done it, he was in. But wait. All Might's booming voice interrupted before Izuku could fully celebrate. "There's more." Izuku blinked, puzzled, his attention snapping back to the projection. "At UA, we don't just build powerful heroes. We forge beacons of hope, individuals who inspire others through their actions and embody the spirit of heroism. And, young man, you exemplified that spirit in ways few could match." The hologram shifted, playing clips of Izuku's heroic efforts during the exam. It showed him aiding overwhelmed examinees, protecting them from sneak attacks, and most notably, saving a particular brown-haired girl trapped beneath rubble as others fled. "Your heroic actions not only impressed the teachers but also inspired a fellow examinee," All Might declared, his voice filled with admiration. The projection transitioned to a recording of the very girl he had saved, leaving Izuku wide-eyed. Present mic, sir," the girl began, her voice hesitant but earnest. "There was this green-haired guy, he saved me from the zero-pointer. But because of that, he couldn't get more points." She hesitated before continuing, "So, I was wondering if I could, maybe give him some of mine." Present Mic's cheerful voice responded with a reassuring laugh. "Oh, don't worry, little listener. That won't be necessary. The score he's got already. Let's just say it's more than enough to pass." The scene cut back to All Might, who gave a proud, knowing smile. "Young Midoriya, your actions spoke volumes about your character. You didn't just earn points, you earned the respect of your peers. That, my boy, is what it truly means to be a hero. I was wrong about you, and I'm so glad I was, young man," All Might said, his voice filled with pride and sincerity. "But now, I must apologize by giving you the answer you've been waiting for." Yes, Midoriya, you can be a hero. Those words shattered the weight of years of doubt and despair. They were the words Izuku had yearned for, prayed for, and clung to in his darkest moments. The dam of emotions finally burst, and tears flowed freely as the overwhelming joy consumed him. For the first time in his life, the dream he had clung to so desperately was no longer just a dream. It was real. The hologram paused for emphasis, his voice brimming with pride. Because of your selfless acts and heroic resolve, you earned an additional 60 rescue points. Combined, that's an astounding 127 points. The top place in the entire entrance exam. Welcome to you, young Midoriya. You have the heart of a true hero. The hologram flickered off, leaving Izuku Midoriya in stunned silence. His face was streaked with tears, not of sadness, but of pure, overwhelming joy. His hands trembled as he wiped his eyes, trying to process what had just happened. He had made it. He had made it. He stepped out into the hallway, where his mother waited anxiously. Seeing the look on his face, her worry instantly melted into a burst of joy. Izuku couldn't help but grin as he shared the news he had passed. Not only that, but he was top of the exam. His mother was so elated she immediately set about making his favorite dish, katsudon, a steaming bowl of comforting breaded pork cutlet over rice. Tonight, they would celebrate together, as family. This has had to be the best day of his life. This had to be the worst day of his life. Rah! The furious roar of Katsuki Bakugo filled the entire household, rattling the walls and shaking the floor. His voice, raw with rage, echoed through the quiet of the Bakugo home. How the F did this happen? Him. Katsuki Bakugo. Second place. To Deku. Deku. The same kid Katsuki Bakugo had always looked down on, the same kid he'd spent years tormenting. How the hell had he beaten him? No, this was impossible. His brain was running in circles, each thought a raw, jagged shard scraping against his sanity. Deku, that quirkless, weak little SHT, had scored higher than him. Katsuki's chest rose and fell with each harsh, ragged breath as his mind shattered and pieced itself together again, each part more furious than the last. There was only one explanation that made sense. He cheated. He bellowed, the words ripping out of him like a beast tearing through its cage. That's the only explanation. He had to have cheated, there's no other way. His teeth ground so hard it felt like they might shatter. His eyes were wide, burning with the kind of fury that could level cities, and his hands twitched, wanting to explode in a fit of violence. He couldn't just sit there. He couldn't let it slide. He had to find out. He had to know how the hell Deku pulled off this impossible feat, and if there was even the slightest chance of foul play, he'd make sure Midoriya paid for it in the only way that made sense. But for now, all Bakugo could do was rage. His body shook with pent-up fury, a storm of anger raging inside him. Midoriya had ruined everything. Everything. And Katsuki Bakugo wasn't about to let some quirkless BSTRD get away with it. Today was the day. The first day of his journey toward becoming a hero. Izuku stood ready, his uniform neat and pristine, a gray blazer, red tie, white shirt, and black trousers. His breakfast was eaten, his bag packed, and his resolve unshakable. He was ready. As he moved toward the door, his mother's voice stopped him in his tracks. Izuku, turning around, he saw her standing there, smiling warmly, her eyes filled with pride. "Yes, Mom," he asked. "I just want you to know," she began, her voice gentle but full of conviction, "I am so proud of you. I think you're really cool." She punctuated her statement with 2 enthusiastic thumbs up. Izuku's heart swelled at her words. A wide, grateful smile spread across his face as he responded, his voice thick with emotion, "Thanks, Mom." With that, he stepped out of the house, ready to face the world and the challenges ahead. 1A, 1A, 1A ha. Found it. Izuku said, his face lighting up in relief as he finally located his classroom. The door loomed ominously large, an architectural choice likely meant to accommodate students with quirks that turned them into Godzilla on steroids. Izuku took a steadying breath, his mind racing with hope. Please don't be Kaken. Please don't be the glasses guy. Please. Sliding the door open, Izuku was immediately greeted by the unmistakable sound of hell breaking loose. F off, Four Eyes. Katsuki's voice boomed, the blonde lounging in his chair with his boots obnoxiously perched on the desk. How dare you, the bespectacled student snapped back, his arms flailing in exaggerated indignation. Using such vulgar language in a prestigious institution is disgraceful. And get your feet off the desk this instant. It's disrespectful to your peers, the seniors before us, and the future heroes who will sit there. Did your old school drive that stick up your butt, or were you born with it? Bakugo sneered, his voice dripping with venom as he leaned back even further in his chair, balancing precariously on two legs. Izuku froze in the doorway, his soul quietly trying to evacuate his body. He wanted to back out, leave, pretend this wasn't happening. But no, this was his life now. Welcome to you, Midoriya. Mid-mocking laughter, Izuku's head snapped around. Ha! He glanced over his shoulder. He could have sworn he heard something. A cackling laugh, faint but distinct. Maybe it was just the wind. Yeah, that had to be it. Definitely not ominous voices mocking his existence. Before he could dwell on it further, his thoughts were interrupted by the sharp bark of a voice. You there? CRP. Izuku stiffened, immediately recognizing the stern, bespectacled boy from earlier. He approached with unnerving speed, his stride purposeful, like a missile locked onto its target. He's going to lecture me again, isn't he? I don't think I can handle another speech about respect right now. To Izuku's shock, the boy abruptly stopped in front of him, bowing deeply. I am Tenya Ida, and I must humbly apologize for my earlier assumptions. Ha! Izuku blinked, utterly lost. Assumptions? About what? Ida straightened, his tone earnest. I initially believed you to be an unworthy candidate who had cheated their way into you, but upon closer observation, I see now that you possess an exceptional and noble character far beyond my comprehension. Wait, what? Not only were you able to pinpoint the reason Present Mike skipped the zero-pointer, Ida said, his voice brimming with admiration, but you also deduced the existence of the rescue point system, a feat of both logic and intuition. For that, I must humbly admit, you are the superior student. Izuku froze, unsure of how to respond. Wait, what? I didn't figure out any of that. I was just, winging it. He smiled nervously, scratching the back of his head. Thanks, I guess. Before Izuku could even attempt to clarify, Ida continued, completely missing the panic in his expression. Your actions are an example we should all strive to emulate. Truly, I must aspire to match your level of insight and heroism. Oh no, Izuku thought, dread pooling in his stomach. He's going to be so disappointed when he finds out I had no idea what I was doing. Izuku was so engrossed in his conversation with Ida that he completely failed to notice Bakugo's murderous glare drilling into the back of his head. If sheer force of will could cause spontaneous combustion, Midoriya would have been ash by now. Hey, I know that messy green hair, a bubbly voice called out, cutting through the tension. Izuku turned around to see the girl he'd saved during the exam. You passed. That's such a relief. But isn't it crazy? We're in the same class. What are the chances, she said with an infectious enthusiasm. Oh, and I'm Ochiko. Ochiko Uraraka. Normally, this would have been the part where Izuku's brain decided, hey, I'm out, good luck, leaving him to flounder like a drowning fish gasping for air. His internal monologue would descend into an orchestra of panic, complete with crashing cymbals and a banshee scream in the background. Stammering. Check. Involuntary sweating. Double check. Potential cardiac arrest. A strong maybe. But not today. Oh, hey. You made it in, too, he replied, his tone calm and collected. I'm Izuku. Bakugo's eye twitched violently. Calm. Calm. This was Deku. He wasn't supposed to function properly around girls, let alone talk to one like a normal person. Katsuki leaned forward, fists clenched. What the actual hell is going on here? I wonder who our teacher is gonna be. I'm so excited I just can't wait. Ochiko practically bounced on her feet, her energy infectious enough to make even the shyest person smile. Midoriya, however, noticed something else: her movements. His eyes instinctively glanced at her ankle, recalling the injury she'd sustained during the entrance exam. Oh, your ankle's healed already? He asked, genuine concern lacing his tone. She tilted her head for a moment before realizing what he meant. Oh yeah. Recovery girl fixed it good as new. She stretched her leg a little, as if to prove the point. Oh, and I never got to ask, what's your chew? Izuku began, but he was abruptly cut off by a tired, almost irritated voice. If you're here to make friends, pack your things and get out, the voice drawled. The students turned toward the desk, where a yellow cocoon-like sleeping bag was stirring. The bag unzipped, revealing a man who looked like he'd just lost a week-long staring contest with insomnia. His long black hair was disheveled, his expression screamed, I'd rather be anywhere else, and his entire vibe was a mix of apathy and exhaustion. The man, whom the students would soon learn was their homeroom teacher, grabbed a stack of gym uniforms from his sleeping bag and tossed them onto the desk with the enthusiasm of a sloth on a hot day. Put these on and meet me at Training Ground C, he said, his monotone voice barely rising above a mumble. Confusion spread across the room, most evident on Uraraka's face. But what about orientation? She asked hesitantly. The man fixed her with a tired stare, somehow managing to exude annoyance without raising his voice. This is a hero school. We have 3 years to turn you into the beacons of hope for tomorrow. We don't have time for pointless celebrations. Now go, he finished, his sarcasm so dry it could have started a fire. The class collectively decided not to argue. As the students filed into Training Ground C, the perpetually exhausted man was already waiting for them, standing with the posture of someone who'd lost a fight with a mattress. It took you all 8 minutes to get here, he stated flatly, not even bothering to look up from the digital clipboard he held. His tone was so devoid of energy it made coffee seem like a myth. We'll need to fix that. Some students exchanged uneasy glances, while others shifted nervously. Katsuki just sneered, muttering something explosive under his breath. Without giving them a chance to respond, the man continued, still monotone but with the faintest edge of menace. Let's see if you're worth my time. Today's activity is a quirk apprehension test. The man lazily tossed a ball to Midoriya, barely lifting his hand above waist level. Midoriya, he muttered, his voice still monotone, you scored first in the entrance exams. You go first. He gestured toward a white circle painted on the ground. Step into that circle and throw the ball as far as you can. Anything within the circle goes. Use your quirk. Izuku swallowed hard as the other students' eyes locked onto him, some curious, others judgmental. He felt the weight of expectation settle on his shoulders like a boulder. Bakugo, standing off to the side, glared daggers at him, his expression daring him to mess up. Oh, and don't hold back, the man added flatly, his gaze barely lifting from the digital clipboard. This isn't a kiddie playground. Midoriya's nerves buzzed, but he nodded, stepping into the circle with the ball in hand. This was his chance to prove he deserved to be here. No pressure, right? Ha! This is perfect, Bakugo thought, his smirk growing as he watched Midoriya stand frozen, staring at the ball like it held the secrets of the universe. Now everyone will see what a useless fraud Deku really is. He'll choke, embarrass himself, and they'll expel his butt right then and there. His crimson eyes glinted with malicious glee as he crossed his arms, picturing the scene already, Midoriya stammering excuses, teachers shaking their heads in disappointment, and the entire class laughing him out of you. Game over, Deku, Bakugo thought, his smirk widening to the point where it looked like his face might break. All the while, Izuku was still silently calculating, his gaze fixed on the ball, oblivious to the inferno of schadenfreude blazing a few feet away. I'm not that physically strong compared to strength enhancers, so throwing it normally wouldn't work. Claws might be stronger, but that's a big if, Izuku thought, frustration bubbling under the surface. But then, a sudden idea lit up his mind. Got it. With a surge of determination, his hand began to shift, pieces of his arm warping and twisting into the familiar shape of his rocket launcher. But this time something was off. Even after the form was complete, it kept changing, adjusting itself in ways he didn't expect. The pieces seemed to have a mind of their own, constantly shifting in and out of configurations, like a machine that couldn't quite decide on its final form. Bakugo's eyes widened in disbelief, his brain struggling to keep up with what he was seeing. What the F? His thoughts screamed in pure confusion and rage. Processing. Host reconstructing, hand-to-combat module. Configuration mode, adaptive. New system code, ball launcher, selected. Warning, unauthorized form detected. Core integrity, stable weapon design, improvising error code 002, systems incompatible. RE optimizing trajectory system. Maneuver mode, rocket propulsion. Objective, launch. Error, systems unstable. Reconfiguration in progress. Launch mode, full firepower assembling complete. Activating. Once the transformation was complete, Izuku's left arm shifted into something entirely unexpected. The design was minimalist and utilitarian, no flashy adornments, no unnecessary complexity. Instead, it mirrored the sleek functionality of his rocket launchers, but more refined, purpose-built for a specific task. The forearm clicked and rotated with mechanical precision, quickly forming a compact, barrel-shaped launcher that seemed almost custom-made for the ball throw. It was clean, efficient, and designed for performance, its simple, powerful design a stark contrast to the usual chaos of his other weapons. His classmates gawked in amazement, their eyes wide at the sight of something new and unexpected. But Izuku, still processing the strange turn of events, stared at his arm in confusion. What is this? This isn't my rocket launcher, he waved his new arm around in a panicked gesture. It didn't feel right, this wasn't something he'd planned for. His arsenal had always been a set of clear, usable tools. This was new. Midoriya, the teacher barked, snapping him from his thoughts. We don't have all day. Izuku's eyes widened at the sharp command. Alright, he stammered, trying to regain focus. His heart raced as he looked at the ball in his launcher. Well, this is it. Please work. He quickly inserted the ball, adjusting the angle of his new weapon, trying to line it up with the best trajectory. A brief moment of hesitation filled him with doubt, but with one last look at his classmates and the pressure mounting, he pulled the trigger. The moment Izuku fired the ball, the launcher erupted in a violent explosion, sending a shockwave rippling through the air. The force was enough to throw him back, his feet sliding across the ground as a fierce gust of wind swept through the students, knocking some of them off balance. The ball shot forward with an intensity that seemed almost otherworldly, leaving behind a fiery trail that lit up the sky. The explosive recoil echoed like a cannon blast, the flame strkng across the horizon as it rocketed away, defying expectations with an almost cinematic grace. The sheer power of the launch left the entire training ground in stunned silence, as if the world had momentarily stopped to witness the impact. The teacher's grin twisted into something unsettling, his eyes narrowing as he presented the results. 33 meters, he announced, his voice cold and calculating. The class erupted in surprise. No way, that's crazy, the boy with yellow lightning-streaked hair exclaimed. We get to use our quirks. Totally manly, said the red-haired student, pumped with excitement. This is going to be so fun, added the pink-skinned girl, her enthusiasm evident. But the teacher's expression darkened instantly. His tone dropped to something sharp and menacing, silencing the room in an instant. "Fun?" he questioned ominously. "This is the top hero school in all of Japan, built to train you to the bone. And you're talking about having fun. Well, how about this then?" He leaned forward, the smile that crept across his face sending a chill through the students. "Whoever gets last place is expelled immediately." The grounds went deathly silent. Uraraka's jaw dropped. Expelled? On the first day? Isn't that against the rules?" He glanced at her with an expression that could only be described as, "I'm too tired for this." "I am the rules," he deadpanned. "You gives us a lot of freedom when it comes to how teachers handle their classes," the teacher continued with a tone so dry it could suck the life out of a room. "It's what makes teaching so efficient. That's not fair. We worked hard to get here. You can't just kick us out on the first day." Uraraka shot back, visibly upset. The teacher's expression didn't change. "Rampaging villains, natural disasters, car accidents, the list goes on. But I'm going to cut to the point, life isn't fair. So, you either keep up, or you don't bother trying," he said with a finality that left no room for argument. Uraraka fell silent. "Good." Now, suddenly, a loud, explosive yell interrupted. "DKU. I'll kill you." Bakugo's voice rang out as he charged at Midoriya, his hands glowing with rage and the unmistakable energy of his quirk. He was dead set on blowing him up. Midoriya, panic-stricken, quickly tried to shield himself with his arms, but before Bakugo could even get close, the homeless teacher acted. Stripes of his scarf shot out like living tendrils, coiling around Bakugo with inhuman precision, halting him in his tracks. Bakugo struggled, trying to blast his way out, but something was wrong. His quirk, once an unstoppable force, refused to cooperate, flickering out in what seemed like defiance. Bakugo was about to scream again, but the moment he opened his mouth, Aizawa's piercing gaze shut him down. His eyes glowed a fierce, unnatural red as his hair subtly began to levitate, a clear signal of his control over the situation. He leaned in close, his voice low and dangerous, like a predator closing in on its prey. "What exactly?" Aizawa's tone was ice-cold, every word weighted with venom. "Do you think you're doing, Katsuki?" The scarf tightened, the pressure mounting, and Bakugo's body went rigid with pain. Aizawa's expression was deathly serious, and the air around them felt thick with threat. His eyes glowing red and hair now floating slightly, the teacher leaned in, his voice like a blade, sharp and unforgiving. "I'll say this once and only once, Katsuki. I've read your file. You were a big fish in a small pond, thinking you're some special, irreplaceable gem. But here. You're just another student, one I can easily expel if you try that stunt again. Understood?" The suffocating silence hung in the air until Bakugo grudgingly nodded. Without another word, the teacher released him, and Bakugo stumbled back, seething but subdued. Izuku, watching the tense scene unfold, finally put the pieces together. "You're the underground eraser head," he exclaimed, realizing the teacher's identity. Aizawa, a bit irked but keeping his cool, thought briefly about the annoyance of having fans when his whole shtick as an underground hero was to avoid the spotlight. He quickly dismissed the thought, focusing on the task at hand. "All right, everyone, listen up." His voice was cutting, authoritative, and left no room for debate. "You'll be going through various tests. Don't hold back, and remember, last place gets expelled." His words hung heavy in the air, making it clear that failure wasn't an option for anyone here. 50-meter dash. The universe certainly seems to have it out for Izuku Midoriya. As the 50-meter dash began, Bakugo's furious glare was fixed on him, burning with the intent to crush his supposed rival. The moment the gun fired, Bakugo shot forward, his explosions propelling him faster than any normal person could hope to match. So what if the nerd's hiding something? He's still weak. I'll easily beat him and prove that I'm the one who deserves first place, Bakugo thought, his confidence unwavering as he tore down the track. But as the wind whipped across his face, something unexpected happened. In a split second, Izuku overtook him, a blur of motion. Wings erupted from his back, and with a powerful move, he soared ahead, faster than Bakugo could react. The gap between them widened, leaving Bakugo stunned in his wake. His anger flared, but there was a growing sense of disbelief. Deku was faster than him. No, forget that, Deku had wings. 1 second, 3 seconds, after Bakugo's humiliating loss, the other students took their turns in the 50-meter dash. The glasses-wearing Tenya Ida showcased his speed-enhancing quirk, quickly overtaking Tsuyu Azui, whose frog-like agility wasn't quite enough to match his bursts of acceleration. Each race brought its own surprises, with quirks revealing unique advantages and strategies, but none quite matched the drama of Midoriya's victory over Bakugo. Long Jump Midoriya stood at the edge of the sandpit, studying it with an intent expression. His classmates murmured among themselves, curious about what he would do next. "Hey, Mr. Aizawa," Izuku asked, his voice carrying a mix of nervousness and excitement, "you said anything goes, right?" Aizawa raised an eyebrow, sensing the gears turning in the boy's mind. "Yeah." "Why? What are you planning?" Izuku grinned sheepishly, his confidence growing. Without another word, he spread his wings and leaped into the air. With a powerful flap, he soared effortlessly over the sandpit, clearing it with ease and showing no signs of stopping. Aizawa watched, unimpressed at first, until he realized Midoriya had gone so far he couldn't possibly measure it. "Tch, fine. Infinity," he muttered, scribbling it down on his clipboard. The class erupted into whispers of disbelief, some marveling at the display while others just stared, dumbfounded. "Infinity. He broke the test," someone exclaimed. Izuku landed a short distance away, scratching the back of his head awkwardly. "Was that okay?" he asked. Aizawa sighed. "It's fine. Just don't make a habit of breaking my tests, problem child." Grip strength test. Midoriya decided to use his claws for the grip strength test, digging them into the device with a calculated force. His result, 250 kilograms, just 25 kilograms short of Shoji's impressive 275 kilograms. While Shoji's score remained the highest, Midoriya's claw-assisted grip showcased the unique strength of his quirk in comparison. Consecutive side jumps. Midoriya faced a challenge here, lacking a quirk or enhancement specifically suited for this test. Forced to rely on his natural physical strength, he managed a respectable performance but fell short of dominating. This marked the first time Bakugo managed to surpass him during the evaluations, earning the blonde a rare moment of satisfaction. In other exercises, such as the seated toe touch, sit-ups, and endurance tests, Midoriya fared much better. His enhanced stamina, a result of his rigorous training and absolute Arsenal's passive benefits, allowed him to excel, especially in activities demanding prolonged effort. Then came the ball throw. Aizawa tossed the ball to Bakugo, who caught it with a confident smirk. Stepping into the circle, he wound up his arm, yelling, "Die," at the top of his lungs before launching the ball with a massive explosion. That has to beat Deku's pathetic score, Bakugo thought smugly as the ball soared through the air. Aizawa glanced at the results with his usual disinterested expression before holding up the display, for meters. The blonde's triumphant look faltered. He had been overshadowed by Deku once again and by a considerable margin. As if to add insult to injury, Uraraka stepped up next. She casually activated her quirk, making the ball weightless before throwing it gently into the air. The ball floated endlessly, earning her a begrudging infinity from Aizawa as he logged the results. Bakugo clenched his fists in frustration, the air around him practically crackling with suppressed rage. "Stupid nerds," he muttered through gritted teeth. Another student, a girl with sleek black hair tied into a spiky ponytail, approached the circle with a calm confidence. Extending her hand, she conjured a massive, functional cannon seemingly out of thin air using her quirk. The bulky weapon dwarfed Izuku's streamlined launcher in size but operated on a similar principle. With precise aim and a deafening blast, she launched the ball high into the sky. It shot forward with incredible force, earning her an impressive 34 meters, once again eclipsing Bakugo's score. The explosive blonde's eye twitched, his frustration simmering dangerously as another student managed to surpass him. What the hell is going on, he thought furiously, fists clenched. I'm supposed to be the best, no one outshines me. His glare darkened, a growl slipping under his breath as he struggled to contain the storm of emotions building inside him. Thankfully, the universe seemed to have done its part in humbling him. It was finally time to reveal the results. Izuku Midoriya Momo Yayorozu Katsuki Bakugo Shoto Todoroki Tenya Ida Fumikage Tokoyami Mizo Shoji Mashireo Ojiro Ijiro Kirishima Mina Ashido Ibra Shiozaki Achiko Uraraka Koji Koda Rikido Sato Tsuyu Azui Denki Kaminari Yuga Aoyama Hanta Siro Kyoka Jiro Toru Hagakure, no way I actually got first. Izuku exclaimed, his voice brimming with joy, his tail that most didn't notice till now wagging excitedly. Top 10. So manly, the red-haired teen with spiky hair cheered, flexing his arms in triumph. Meanwhile, Bakugo stood frozen, trembling with a mix of rage and disbelief. His expression twisted, and it looked as though steam might erupt from his ears at any moment. Third. I got third. He fumed internally, grinding his teeth. It's bad enough that I lost to that useless Deku, but to that ponytail beach too. His knuckles cracked audibly as his hands flexed, sparking small explosions of frustration. Among all the reactions, one stood out the most, a sudden, heartbreaking sobbing from a corner of the group. Heads turned as the sound grew louder, and it didn't take long for the students to piece it together. Toru? Achicho hesitantly asked. The invisible girl's voice cracked through her sobs. I didn't even realize how far behind I was. I thought I'd be better at this, but now I might not even get to stay here. Her words tugged at everyone's hearts, the previously tense atmosphere shifting to one of discomfort and sympathy. Aizawa, completely unfazed, spoke up in his usual flat tone. Oh, by the way, the whole expulsion thing was a lie. A collective gasp erupted from the students, their disbelief and indignation palpable. Aizawa shrugged lazily, not caring for their protests. It was a logical deception to get you all to do your best, and it worked, he added with a faint smirk. I honestly thought everybody knew, Momo Yayorozu chimed in, her tone exuding an air of superiority that caught the attention of her classmates. There's simply no way he'd expel someone based solely on a physical test, especially on the first day. It would be an egregious waste of potential for students whose strengths lie outside physical enhancement. Besides, it would be hypocritical considering he doesn't even have a physical enhancement quirk. She crossed her arms with a satisfied expression, her words leaving some students impressed and others rolling their eyes at her patronizing dlvry. Toru barely registered anything else, her relief washing over her like a tidal wave. So I'm not expelled, she stammered, her voice trembling with hope. Aizawa gave her a tired glance before waving dismissively. No, you're not. Class dismissed. Pack your things and go home, he said flatly, already turning to leave. The invisible girl let out a loud, joyous cry of relief, her sobbing transforming into incoherent gratitude as the rest of the class began to process what had just happened. Midoriya entered the boys' locker room to change back into his uniform, the adrenaline of the day still buzzing faintly in his system. As he opened his locker, a cheerful voice called out to him. Yo, Midoriya, right. Your performance out there was seriously manly. The red-haired boy with sharp features and a bright smile stepped forward, extending his fist. Name's Kirishima. Izuku blinked, startled by the enthusiasm, but managed a small smile. Oh, thanks. I really appreciate it, he said, bumping the offered fist. Before Izuku could turn back to his locker, another voice chimed in, this one more curious. Hey, Midoriya, said the yellow-haired boy with a black lightning streak in his hair, leaning against a nearby bench. What's your quirk, man? I mean, I saw those wings and that crazy ball launcher. It was awesome. Several of the other boys perked up, clearly interested in the answer. Izuku rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly, suddenly aware of all the eyes on him. Especially Bakugo. Well, I call it absolute arsenal, Midoriya explained, raising his hands as his fingers shifted seamlessly into sharp metallic claws. It lets me create weapons using nanometals living inside my body. To demonstrate, he began cycling through various forms. I've got claws, he said, flexing the razor-sharp tips. With a thought, they morphed into a sleek, glowing blade with a yellow edge. A sword. The blade retracted, replaced by the barrel of an advanced firearm. Guns, he added, shifting again to reveal a small missile launcher embedded in his arm. Missiles. Finally, he activated his newest addition, a compact ball launcher. And this one, he admitted with a sheepish grin, I didn't even know I could make until today. I was trying to use my rocket launchers for the ball throw, and this thing just kind of happened. The boys stared in awe, with Kirishima grinning. That's so manly. You're like a walking armory. Denki nodded in agreement, his eyes wide. Dude, that's insane. You're a human Swiss Army knife with missiles. A buff teen with pronounced lips pointed at Izuku's tail, focusing on the glowing yellow canister near its tip. What about that thing? He asked curiously. Oh, this. Izuku raised the sharp harpoon-like edge of his tail, careful to keep it pointed away from everyone. It's basically a stinger, he explained, gesturing for his classmates to step back. Once they gave him enough room, he demonstrated by picking up a broken pen with the stinger and stabbing it. The pen sizzled immediately as its plastic began to melt, collapsing into a gooey puddle. Yeah, it's filled with some kind of acid, Izuku admitted, lowering the stinger carefully. I don't really know why I have it, and I can't retract it like my other weapons, so I've got to be super careful around people. The boys stared at the puddle in awe, their reactions ranging from amazement to unease. Dude, that's hardcore, a black-haired teen with elbow joints resembling tape dispensers finally said, instinctively. Taking a step farther back for good measure. After that whole encounter in the locker room, Izuku left the school and was walking home alone. From a distance, Bakugo watched him, his fists clenching with frustration. Perfect, now that I've got that DMN Deku alone, I'll corner him and blow his stupid face to dash. Hey, wait up. Bakugo froze mid-thought, his glare sharpening. Izuku turned, startled, to see Achiko running to catch up, her expression cheerful as always. Close behind her was Ida, striding forward with his usual precise steps. Huh. What's up? Izuku asked, confused by their sudden appearance. We're all taking the same train, so I thought it would be nice to walk together. I hope that's not a problem, Ida said in his usual stern tone, though this time it lacked the scolding edge. Instead, it carried an unusual casualness almost friendly. Achiko grinned and added, yeah, I mean, it's way more fun than going alone, right? Izuku blinked, caught off guard by their camaraderie. Sure. That sounds great. As they continued to walk together, Bakugo's fists clenched tighter, his frustration building. Deku DMN it. He turned away with a growl, muttering under his breath, stupid extras. The next few days at UA had been relatively normal English, math, and heroics basics, the usual routine. It felt surprisingly calm for a school training the next generation of heroes. Some students were starting to feel the monotony creep in. Man, I'm not complaining or anything, but isn't this a bit too normal for the best hero school in Japan? Mina, the pink-skinned girl, lamented, laying her head down on her desk. Well, maybe the heroic stuff will come in next week, Suyu, the frog girl, replied with a reassuring tone, trying to lift the spirits of her classmate. Didn't they say All Might was going to teach here? Ojiro, the boy with the tail, asked, his voice full of curiosity. I remember seeing him in the acceptance letter video. I know, right? The girl with biological earphone jacks chimed in. I haven't seen him since that message. Makes me wonder if he's just too busy for teaching. At that moment, Ibra, the girl with vines for hair, stood up, her hands clasped together in prayer and holy SHT is that holy light. Fellow classmates, she began, her voice both earnest and fervent. We must have faith in you, for there is no perfection in man, only in our Lord. It is He alone who is perfect, and we should expect nothing less from Him. Let us remember His divine plan and trust that everything happens according to His will. She finished her statement with a reverent bow of her head, as if to emphasize the gravity of her words, and the holy spotlight faded away. The classroom fell into an awkward silence after Ibra's divine speech, her holy light slowly dissipating like the aftermath of a thunderstorm. Ciro, still wide-eyed and confused, raised his hand with a tremble. Did everyone else see that light too? He asked, his voice wobbling. His eyes darted around the room, clearly worried he might be losing it. Before anyone could answer, the ground rumbled beneath them with the unmistakable thud of massive footsteps. The entire class stiffened, glancing nervously at the shaking walls. Were they about to be attacked? Was there an earthquake? Or worse, was this another one of Aizawa's tests? And then boom. The door slammed open with a crash that sent a shockwave through the room. The doorway was practically ripped off its hinges, revealing the towering figure of none other than HAHAHHA. I am here. Entering the classroom like a normal person. All Might bellowed, leaning dramatically on the doorframe with a massive grin, his iconic hero pose making the whole class feel like they were in a bad action movie. His voice rang out with the force of a megaphone, echoing off the walls. All Might, the class erupted in unison, eyes wide and mouths agape. Well, everyone except for the student with the half-and-half hair, who stared as though this was just another ordinary Tuesday, and Bakugo, who was far too annoyed to muster anything resembling surprise. He crossed his arms and scowled, muttering under his breath. In the blink of an eye, the oversized man had practically crushed the entrance, his ridiculous size finally making sense as the doorframe was now half gone. Apparently, it had been designed for him. He's wearing his Silver Age costume. Izuku exclaimed with undeniable excitement. All Might shot a brief, knowing glance at him, before addressing the class with his signature exuberance. Today, class, we will be doing the most important aspect of hero training, combat exercises. Bakugo's previously held indifference vanished, replaced by unrestrained excitement. The moment All Might pressed a button, compartments with student names slid out, and the screen displayed, "Meet me at Mach City Gamma and put on your hero costumes." The anticipation in the room was electric as the students rushed to get ready for their first real taste of hero work. Everyone eagerly grabbed their costumes and headed to the locker rooms, but Izuku paused, his eyes narrowing at the unfamiliar outfit in his hands. All Might, noticing the hesitation, called out, "Is there a problem, Midoriya?" Izuku pointed at the costume, his confusion evident. "Sir, this isn't my costume." "Isn't it?" All Might raised an eyebrow, puzzled. "But this is the one you submitted to the support department." "Are you sure?" Izuku shook his head. "I'm pretty sure. I don't even remember submitting a sketch to the support department. The one I submitted was the costume my mom made for me." He held up the costume, still unsure. He didn't recall sketching anything like this, nor did he remember sending it to the department, yet something about it felt like his responsibility. "Put it on. Put it on. Put it on. Actually, maybe I submitted it really late at night, and I just forgot," Izuku mumbled to himself, trying to explain it away as he headed toward the locker rooms, leaving a slightly confused All Might behind. "Look at you all, dressed like true heroes." All Might exclaimed with pride, hands resting on his hips as he observed Class 1A walking into the training grounds. Remember, looking the part is just as important as the work itself. Each costume was as unique as its wearer, showcasing the variety of personalities and quirks among the students. Kirishima stood proudly in his hero gear, dark red shoulder pads shaped like hardened rock, a jagged red sash with an R emblem, and loose black pants. His boots were dark red, his calves surrounded by thick rings, and a wired guard covered his face, with spiked pieces around his jaw resembling fangs. "This is my Red Riot look," he explained briefly with a grin, striking a heroic pose. Aoyama, meanwhile, looked like a knight from a fairy tale, his costume adorned with shining metallic details. His armor had lenses on the joints and stomach, with a dramatic cape flowing behind him, all designed to accentuate his flair for the dramatic. A glamorous knight in shining armor, of course, he declared, his typical flair filling his voice. And then there was Momo's, well, it was a bit much. The revealing design of her costume might have raised a few eyebrows, but All Might quickly focused on the other students, only to realize one was still missing. "I'm here." Midoriya's voice rang out just as All Might had started to wonder where he was. Izuku rushed out of the tunnel to join his classmates, and his costume immediately caught the attention of everyone in the area. He wore a sleek, skin-tight black shirt that seemed to fit him like a second skin. Over it, he donned a stylish trench coat with fur lining the collar. His black combat pants were adorned with subtle carbon fiber plates at the knee, forearm, and shoulder, reinforcing his combat-ready look. To top it off, he wore a crisp pilot hat with a small emblem on the front, a skull flanked by wings. The whole look was an unexpected blend of cool and practical, turning heads as Midoriya ran to meet his peers. "Whoa, cool costume Izuku. I didn't expect this, but it's still really awesome," Ochiko said, excitedly walking up to him and inspecting his outfit. Izuku's eyes widened as she got closer, his attention immediately drawn to her own costume. It was a sleek, skin-tight black full-body suit, with a pale pink design running down the middle, accented by two black semi-spheres on her chest. Pink stripes at her midsection and a deep pink choker further emphasized her striking look, and her headgear with a tinted visor caught his eye as well. But the tight nature of the suit left very little to the imagination, and his face instantly turned bright red. Why your costume is really cool too, Ochiko." Izuku stammered, his hands awkwardly fumbling at his sides as he tried to maintain eye contact, but his gaze kept nervously darting away. His voice was quiet, and he tried to focus on anything but her costume to prevent his embarrassment from growing further. "Huh? You think so?" Ochiko blinked in surprise. "Well, it's nice, but I just wish I had been more specific about the size I wanted." It ended up being skin-tight, she admitted, giving a quick tug on the fabric before letting it snap back to her skin with a light stretch. At that moment, Ibra, the girl with vines for hair, stood nearby, watching the exchange with a serious expression. "Temptations are everywhere," she said solemnly, her voice almost reverent. "It takes one who is pure of mind and purged of evil thoughts to resist them." Her costume, fittingly, was simple, a white toga draped over her body with vines woven throughout, giving her an almost ethereal presence. "All right, class, gather round. I'll begin explaining today's exercise." All Might boomed with his trademark enthusiasm. "As you know, villains are notorious for carrying out evil schemes in public, but did you know that some of the most sinister plans happen behind closed doors? That's exactly what we'll be focusing on today." The class leaned in, intrigued, as All Might continued. "There will be two teams, heroes and villains. The heroes must infiltrate the villain's base and either touch the fake bomb hidden inside or capture both villains. The villains, on the other hand, must either prevent the heroes from getting to the bomb or capture the heroes themselves. The teams will be decided by lottery cards. Any questions?" Ida raised his hand sharply, as expected. "Yes, Tenya." All Might acknowledged him. "Sir, is the use of randomized team selection truly the most effective method for forming teams in such an exercise?" Ida asked, his tone laced with his characteristic precision. "Actually, it's the most realistic approach," Midoriya blurted before immediately realizing that all eyes were now on him. His face flushed as he nervously cleared his throat. What I mean is heroes often need to form teams on the spot, usually without much prior knowledge of each other's quirks. So, it makes sense to simulate something like that here," he explained, his voice gaining a little confidence as he spoke. All Might grinned. Exactly, young Midoriya. In the real world, heroes rarely have the luxury of choosing their allies. This exercise is about adaptability and quick thinking as much as it is about teamwork. Now, gather round for your cards, everyone. All Might declared enthusiastically. The students eagerly crowded around, each receiving a card marked with a letter from A to D. After the cards were distributed, All Might turned back to address the class. Once you've got your cards, look to the screen to find out your opponents and team members. Each team consists of 5 people, and your designated areas are marked with the corresponding letters. Proceed to the area labeled with your card's letter. He gestured towards the 4 clearly marked zones labeled A, B, C, and D. As Izuku made his way to Zone C, he glanced nervously at his teammates. His group included Ibara, Uraraka, Siro, and Jiro. Not exactly a powerhouse lineup, he thought, glancing between them. But we've got versatility. We can make this work. Feeling a glimmer of confidence, he turned his attention to the screen to see the matchups, Team A versus Team B, Team C versus Team D. He smiled faintly until he scrolled down to see who was on Team D. His heart sank like a ship with a hole the size of Bakugo's ego. Team D, Bakugo, Momo, Kirishima, Ida, and Shoji. Izuku paled. Well, CRP. Beside him, Uraraka peeked at the screen. Oh, wow, Bakugo's on Team D, guess this'll be intense. Intense. Izuku thought. That's not intense. That's a death squad. He could practically hear Bakugo laughing maniacally already, explosions in tow. Meanwhile, Momo's strategizing, Kirishima's punching through walls, Ida's running circles around everyone, and Shoji is, well, Shoji could hear, smell and taste them from a mile away. As if on cue, Siro clapped him on the back. Hey, don't worry, Midoriya. We've got this. Izuku forced a shaky smile. Sure, if. By this, you mean the fastest loss in hero school history. Izuku clenched his fists, determination flooding back into him. Alright, focus, Midoriya. No time to panic. If we're going to last even 5 seconds against Team D, we need a solid plan. Work with our strengths, cover our weaknesses. Let's do this. Meanwhile, across the room, Bakugo's grin stretched wider, practically splitting his face in 2. His crimson eyes gleamed with uncontained malice as he cracked his knuckles. This is it. My moment. I'm not just going to beat that DMN nerd, I'm gonna crush him so hard, he'll be begging to leave you, eh? Before anyone could act on their simmering vendettas, All Might's voice boomed through the area, pulling everyone's attention. Teams A and B, you're up first. Team B, please enter the building and begin your preparations. You have 5 minutes. Team A, prepare outside. Good luck to both teams. The announcement snapped Izuku out of his scheming. He watched as teams A and B began moving to their respective positions, leaving a brief moment of quiet for the rest of them. Siro leaned in and whispered, "You look like you just saw a ghost." "Relax, dude. We've got this." Izuku smiled nervously but thought to himself, if Bakugo's the ghost, then this is a haunted house I'm not ready to enter. Team A consisted of Todoroki, Tokoyami, Koda, Ashido, and Hagakure, while Team B was made up of Ojiro, Aoyama, Tsuyu, Sato, and Kaminari. As Team B entered the building, they immediately gathered to strategize. "Alright, huddle up, guys," Kaminari said, a serious expression replacing his usual carefree attitude. His teammates leaned in, eager to hear his plan. "So, what's the plan? I thought you had a plan." Sato asked, blinking in disbelief. "I don't know, people usually come up with plans when they huddle up, right?" Kaminari trailed off, his voice losing all confidence. "Well, I think the first person we need to worry about is Todoroki," Tsuyu said, her voice disturbingly calm. "He could freeze the entire building, and we'd all be stuck there like popsicles. Kero. And if we dodge Todoroki's ice cube machine, we still have Tokoyami and Ishido to deal with. Not to mention Toru possibly sneaking up on us like some invisible ninja, Ojiro added, crossing his arms. Kaminari scratched his head, looking at his teammates like they were overreacting. Great, so we're up against the human ice tray, the bird shadow duo, a walking acid trip, and the invisible girl who might be listening to us right now, right? Ugh, this is a nightmare, Sato groaned. We can't even blame this on a lack of snacks anymore. Aoyama dramatically placed a hand on his chest and struck a pose. Mon Amos, fear not. For I, the dazzling Aoyama, shall illuminate our path to victory. With my blinding brilliance, I will distract them all with my radiant charm. He twirled his hand in the air, clearly pleased with his own idea. We shall be victorious, or at least look fabulous while being defeated. They all stared at him for a long moment, and then Kaminari took a deep breath, finally standing tall. Alright, guys, I have a plan but, it's got like a 5% chance of working. Well, better than 0, I suppose, so you shrugged. Rib bit. Alright, here's what we'll do. Team A, you may now enter the building. All Might's voice rang through the speakers, signaling the start of the mission. Team A immediately tensed, ready to advance until Todoroki held up a hand, signaling them to stop. The moment was heavy with anticipation as Todoroki stood still, eyes narrowing. Without a word, he tapped his foot once on the ground. Instantly, a massive surge of ice exploded from his position, encasing the entire building in a slick layer of frost. It spread quickly, freezing the walls, the floor, the ceiling. The building became a shimmering, icy prison. Todoroki's cold voice cut through the silence. We win. His teammates hesitated, watching the crystalline landscape take shape around them. His power was overwhelming, and the building was now an ice fortress impenetrable to the unprepared. They waited for the confirmation. However, nothing happened. A moment passed. Then another. Team A, why aren't you advancing? All Might's voice echoed once more. The villains are still at large. Ha! Todoroki blinked in confusion, looking around at the icy labyrinth he had created. His brow furrowed. Why aren't they? He walked forward, expecting to enter the base but was immediately halted as a beam of blinding light shot down from above, slamming into the floor with a flash. He barely had time to react before the light shifted direction, now aimed at the pillars supporting the building's ceiling. The laser melted through the structure with brutal precision. The ground shook, and the ceiling groaned under the strain. Dust and debris began to rain down, threatening to collapse the building onto them. Todoroki's eyes widened. There was no time to think, his reflexes kicked in. With a chilling roar, he raised both hands, freezing the pillars and the entire ceiling in a flash of intense frost. The laser cut through the ice, but Todoroki's control was absolute. The beam shattered harmlessly against his frozen surface, but the weight of the ceiling still caused cracks to form in the frozen structure. Move! Todoroki barked. His team scrambled to avoid the falling debris, but the danger was far from over. The ice was strong, but it wasn't invincible. They had to move fast. He quickly glanced at the others, his gaze steely and determined. Don't just stand there, keep moving. They darted forward, the sound of shifting ice and collapsing debris filling the air. Todoroki remained poised, keeping the ice shielded above them, his focus unbroken. He had expected resistance, but this was different. He had underestimated how well the other team had prepared. And now, they were going to pay. Todoroki, watch out. The warning rang in his ears too late. Todoroki whipped his head around just as the flash of light intensified. 5 million volts. Well, sh dash.